I was coming back from a very tiring 2-week trip to Europe. Finally, I had gotten a signature from one of my company's biggest clients on a contract. This contract would keep half of our workers busy for more than a year and a half. I work as a technical sales representative for a special engineering company. The night before, I talked to my boss. To say Mr. Roy was happy would be putting it lightly. He was excited to see me on Monday morning in his office. He promised that I would get a nice bonus that would add a lot of money to my bank account. Since it was Friday, he told me to take my wife to our favorite restaurant. He said to enjoy the best food and wine because he would pay the whole bill. Right after I hung up with my boss, I called Sophie, my wife for 5 years. I wanted to tell her we had great news and asked her to book a babysitter for our 2.5-year-old daughter, Melody, my little angel. She didn't answer, so I left a message. I tried not to sound too excited, but honestly, I was almost giggling. Can you believe it? A guy giggling, and an engineer at that. I couldn't wait to get on the plane that morning. If I could have made it take off faster by running, I would have. I missed my wife, and I knew that evening was going to be just perfect. I already had a picture in my mind of how I wanted it to end. Okay, that might sound simple, but after being gone for 2 long weeks, and with Sophie having just finished her month's difficult week, you could say I was feeling the pressure big time. When I walked into the house late that afternoon, I joked, "Hey, honey, here comes the good news guy, feeling proud of getting the job done." Not bad for an engineer, I thought, since we're not usually known for sweet words. In the kitchen, Sophie's voice came back weak and sad. That was strange. She was usually full of energy and happy to see me after being apart for so long. I thought she'd run to the door. The living room was dark and quiet. That meant Melody was already asleep. That was also odd because it was late for her nap. Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of red juice in front of her. That was strange, too. She didn't like that juice. It was only for Melody. I could see she had been crying. Her eyes were redder than the juice. "Hey, my love, what's wrong?" I asked. I tried to hug and kiss her, but she turned away and didn't want to be close. She started crying again. She couldn't speak and just motioned for me to sit down. She kept crying. I tried to gently touch her arm, but she pulled away. She seemed like she really needed comfort, but she refused all my efforts, so I just sat there feeling worried and lost. Her crying slowly slowed down. Then she put her hand over mine and looked straight into my eyes. "This morning I woke up in another man's bed," she said quietly. "What? What did you just say?" I asked, shocked. "I mean, I spent the night with another man, and yes, we were close," she said, her voice breaking as she began to cry again. I sank back in my chair, unable to take it all in right away. Sophie had her face in her hands and was softly crying. "I'm so sorry, Chris. I didn't want this to happen. I don't know what came over me. Maybe I had too much wine. I lost control," she said. "Who was he?" I asked, surprise and anger creeping into my voice. "His name is Daniel Levesque. He's a friend of Chantal's, from work. We had a get-together with some teachers last night, like we do every Thursday when Friday is off. He joined us at the bar. I'd never met him before. Somehow, he convinced me to come home with him. I don't really remember how we ended up at his place. I woke in the night, still a bit drunk, and aware enough to notice the man beside me, but not clear enough to think about what was happening. It hit me hard when I woke up at 10 this morning." She started crying again. My anger grew with each minute. In that moment, I forgot about my signed contract and the bonus I was to receive. It's strange how quickly a good mood can disappear. I stood up, grabbed my coat and keys. "I'm going out. I need some fresh air," I said. "No, stay here," she shouted. "Excuse me? What makes you think you get to tell me what I can or cannot do after what you just told me?" I replied. "I'll be the one leaving," she said quietly. "My father is coming to pick me up. I messaged him when I heard your car. He'll be here soon. I'll spend the weekend at my parents'. I'll be back Sunday evening." "Will you be at your parents' or at your friend's place?" I asked, feeling sick inside. "Chris, I know you're upset. If I were you, I'd be upset too, believe me. But I swear I won't see that man again. It was a mistake. Just one time," she said. "Where is Melody?" I asked. "She's already at my parents'. I took her there this afternoon so we could talk without interruptions. She'll come back with me on Sunday." "Okay, so you've already decided to leave and want full care of our daughter." "Wow, I'm surprised. I didn't think you'd leave me this easily," I said, joking. Sophie didn't get upset. "Chris, I'm not leaving you. That's the last thing I want to do. Really? And I would never do anything to come between you and Melody. I saw her dad's car stop by the curb. I love you, Chris. More than you know. What happened was a mistake, and I'm really sorry. I'm going with Melody to my parents' house. No, I'm sure you'll need a few days to think about this, or maybe drink, or get even. She didn't finish because she started crying again. She grabbed her bag that had been near the door the whole time, which I hadn't noticed before, and quickly got into her dad's car. Get even, I whispered to myself, like that would help anything. See? I hurt you more than you hurt me. Who wins now? As if I was going to be that childish. I still had my coat on, but I thought if I wanted a couple of beers, better to have them at home instead of making a scene at the bar and risking driving under the influence. I only managed to sip one beer all night and didn't even eat dinner. My head was foggy. I didn't know what to do, and was too tired after traveling for 2 weeks to think straight. I was angry, yes, but also felt like this was something that had to happen sooner or later. I met Sophie Gilbert at CEGEP. This is a school here in Quebec that comes between high school and university. We were in the same philosophy class in our last semester, and by chance, were paired to write 4 papers together to pass the course. Our first meeting was at the student cafe on a Wednesday afternoon. As we started working on the first question, our talk drifted, and we ended up talking about everything, but didn't finish the assignment. To make it simple, we started dating that weekend. Sophie went to Concordia University to study mathematics to become a teacher. I went to Polytechnique for biomedical engineering. Since both schools were in the city, we moved in together after 2 years of dating and got married the summer after I graduated. Melody arrived 3 years later, and for 2 months, we had been working hard on adding a second child to the Harvey Gilbert family. No, women in Quebec don't take their husband's last name when they marry. We had been a happy couple and a happy family. Sophie and I were not only husband and wife, but she was also my best friend, and I was hers. Well, until just a few hours before. Jet lag finally caught up with me, and I went to my bedroom a little before 9 p.m. My mind was still full of worries, but there would be plenty of time to think about them tomorrow. I woke up around 4:30 in the morning, unable to fall back asleep. There was a message from Sophie on my phone. I love you, Chris. I love you so much. She had sent it after I went to bed the night before. For now, I chose not to reply. Sometimes staying quiet can cause fewer problems than speaking too soon. After my usual morning routine, I made a pot of coffee, grabbed a pencil and some paper, and started to write down my thoughts about everything that happened. I always found that writing down what was on my mind and reading it again later helped me see things more clearly. Did I still love Sophie? That wasn't even something to doubt. Of course, I still loved her. Love is not something that can be turned on or off quickly. But could I forgive her? Would it be better to stay or leave? Could I trust her again? If I stayed, how would I feel when I had to leave on my next work trip? As I thought about these questions, one idea grew stronger than the rest. I had lived through many chances to spend time with women in hotel bars or restaurants when I was away. I'm sure if I had wanted, some of those nights would have ended in me staying at their place or them at mine. But I had never taken that step. Some of those women were very attractive, even stunning. Still, I had always been able to control myself. Honestly, it hadn't been that hard. So why had Sophie not been able to do the same? Was that Daniel person somehow more appealing than me? Did she not love me as much as I loved her? Did she not see our marriage as something worth protecting from outside temptations? And why had she not given me the chance to respond or talk things through yesterday? Instead, she just shut me out and went to her parents' house. Yes, such a calm and helpful way to handle a serious problem. I just hoped she didn't act that way with her students. I made myself a proper breakfast. After almost a week in France eating croissants and jam, eggs and bacon seemed like a treat. When it was late enough in the morning that I wouldn't bother my neighbors, I started mowing the lawn to give it its last cut for the season. The rest of the day I spent running errands and doing laundry. I picked up some sushi on my way home and had an early dinner. While I was eating, I got a message from Sophie. Are you okay, Chris? I'm so sorry. I love you. I had calmed down a bit since yesterday when she told me everything. Maybe she was right. It might be better to have some time alone to feel better. I tried to write a careful reply, but I wasn't ready. I sent back, I love you too, Soph. I just don't know how to handle this yet, she replied with crying faces. We'll talk tomorrow. I miss Melody. Please don't come home too late. I went to bed early again. I wanted to see my daughter and talk with Sophie. Sunday was quiet. Sophie's father came by to bring her and Melody home after dinner. I went outside to meet them. I held Melody close for a minute. She started chattering about things that happened at Grandma and Grandpa's. Sophie's dad gave me a friendly hug. I'm sorry you're all caught in this mess, Chris. Please don't be too hard on Sophie. She feels very guilty, Norman said. Honestly, I haven't been very kind to her, and neither has her mom, he added, looking upset. I'm calmer than I was yesterday, Norm. I won't yell at her. I just want to understand and see what to do next. He patted my shoulder, kissed Sophie and Melody, and left. I read Melody a bedtime story and tucked her in. Sophie was waiting for me in the kitchen with a glass in her hand. No red wine tonight? I asked. No. I still felt bad from Friday. I thought I'd never enjoy drinking again. But I'm okay now. Want some? I poured a beer instead of wine and sat with her in the living room, waiting for her to talk. Chris, I love you and I'm so sore. Yes, I know, Soph, you're sorry. I hear you. You said it many times. I just need to know why you did this. Do you feel unhappy with us? Are you in love with that other guy? No. No, not at all, she almost shouted. Yes, he's good-looking and fun to talk to, but I don't love him. It's you I love, Chris. Then why? I asked, watching her play with her glass. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't thinking clearly because of the wine. I was missing you a lot, and I started to feel lonely. Come on, Soph. That's not true. I was almost home. You could have waited a few hours, I said, upset. I know it wasn't smart. I hate myself for being so weak, Sophie said softly. Did you use protection at least? Sophie looked at me for a few seconds and then started crying. I guess I already knew the answer. Her crying got so loud, it woke up Melody. I took that as a chance to leave the kitchen and went upstairs to calm my little daughter. After about 10 minutes, I went back downstairs. Sophie's loud crying had softened into quiet sobs. If you are pregnant with this guy's child, it's over between us, Soph. I'm not going to raise his kid, I said, maybe a bit too harshly. Sophie looked crushed. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but I was so angry, I almost felt bad seeing her upset. Oh, and one more thing. Until we know for sure you're not pregnant, I'll sleep in the guest room in the basement, I added. Sophie kept crying quietly but didn't say anything. It was like she couldn't handle any more pain. I went upstairs, grabbed some clothes and toiletries, and took them downstairs. As I passed her, she had her head in her hands, still crying. I almost didn't talk to Sophie the next morning. I dropped Melody off at daycare and went to work. Mr. Roy smiled widely when he came into my office, ready to hear how the negotiations went and if I had a nice celebration with my wife. But his smile faded when he saw how sad I looked. This is the bill for our dinner at that fancy restaurant on Friday, I said, pretending to hand him a paper. Cost? $0 thanks to a jerk named Daniel Levesque. Mr. Roy looked shocked. I sighed deeply and told him about my personal troubles. What will you do now? He asked after I finished. I'll keep sleeping in the basement until we know if she's pregnant. If she is, I'll find a family lawyer and start a divorce. If not, I'll try marriage counseling and see if we can fix things. I might need to take a few days off soon. He told me that was fine and left my office, thanking me again for the work I did in Europe. I closed the door and sank into my chair, unsure I could make it through the day. That evening, the talk at home was very quiet. When I got home at 6, Sophie had already fed Melody and was finishing our dinner. It felt like a sad night. We barely spoke. The rest of the week followed the same cold, silent pattern. The next week was no different. Sophie's cycle had always been very regular, like a clock, so I had a good idea when her period would start. The next day, I noticed she was uneasy, and it didn't get better the day after. By then, I was almost sure about what was happening. 3 weeks after that important Friday, I went to see a family lawyer. The lawyer told me the best plan was to ask for a separation first and then do a paternity test when the baby was born. If the baby was mine, which was very unlikely, I could choose to move back in with Sophie, and everything would stop. But if the test showed the baby wasn't mine, I wouldn't have to do anything for the child. Then I could ask for a divorce right away because of her actions without waiting a full year. I agreed, and the lawyer said the papers would be ready the next week. I saw that Sophie was trying hard to delay taking the pregnancy test, but I didn't say anything. I felt this was her problem now. 2 days later, on Wednesday, I came home to Sophie crying. I didn't say anything. The way she looked at me, I knew she understood I had worked everything out. It might still be yours, you know? I laughed hard. It was a harsh, bitter laugh that even I didn't like. Really, Sophie? The last time we were together was a week before my trip to Europe in September. Then you had your period and then I left. So there's no way the baby could be mine. I suggest you tell the man you did this with. He's not my boyfriend, she shouted. Then her voice grew softer and sad. I met him just once. I haven't seen him since we were together. That's your choice, Sophie. I stay out of your relationships now. It's none of my business. I went downstairs to my room and sent a message to my boss saying I would take Thursday and Friday off. I admit I drank some tequila that night to feel better. The next day, I looked at some apartments not far from our house that I had found in the last few days. On Friday morning, I signed a lease for one of them. In the afternoon, I took the subway to my lawyer's office downtown to get the separation papers. When I left his office, I felt lost. No, not just lost. More like I was caught in a wave that was going to change everything I had, and I couldn't stop it. I was deep in thought when I realized I had walked past the subway station and was heading toward Mont Royal, back where this all started. I finally got home, well, the house, around 8 p.m. On the way, I stopped at a nearby pub and had a burger and a beer. I knew Sophie had sent me a message. She was probably starting to worry, but I chose not to open it right away. She wrote, "Where were you? Are you okay?" She sounded truly concerned. I gave her the envelope with the separation papers. "Here, this is your copy," I said quietly. She closed her eyes and sat down without taking the envelope. "This agreement is fair," I explained. "It covers everything about Melody. We will both have shared custody, so neither of us will pay child support. I will also give you some money to help support you. You can keep the house, and I will pay my part for 5 more years. That should give you enough time to save money and find a new place. About your other baby, you need to make arrangements with the father. That isn't my concern, and I won't pay for it," I said coldly. "Oh, and I found an apartment about 2 kilometers from here. I'll start moving my things this weekend. You can keep the furniture we bought together, except for what is in the downstairs bedroom where I stayed the past 3 weeks. I'll also take the things I owned before we got married. My brother will come tomorrow with a truck to help move my stuff to my apartment. I think it's a good idea if you run errands or take Melody to your parents tomorrow morning. That will make things easier for everyone." Sophie looked very sad. I wanted to cry too. I still loved her, but I couldn't forget what had happened. And even if I couldn't raise a child who wasn't mine while still married. It just wasn't possible. I went to Melody's room. I picked her up while she was sleeping and kissed her softly on the forehead. I told her I would see her in a week. Tears came to my eyes. Being apart from my daughter half the time was going to be very hard. I put her back in bed and went to my room in the basement to start packing. The next morning at about 8:30, I went to the kitchen and saw a note from Sophie. She wrote that she and Melody were at her parents' house. She said she loved me and was very upset by what was happening. I knew she was, but I just didn't see another way. A few hours later, we officially lived in separate places. Sophie visited my lawyer the next week and signed everything without asking to change any of it. And so, our separate lives began. Jacob was born on Canada Day, July 1st. The lawyer sent a request for a DNA test. It showed, as expected, that I was not the father of the boy. The divorce could then be made official because of Sophie's mistake, which meant I did not have to wait until November, 1 year after we separated, to finish it. Looking back, I could have waited, and it would not have changed much. But for some strange reason, blaming her for cheating felt like telling the world she was at fault, and that gave me some comfort. It caused her more pain and tears. Was I being mean? I don't know. Maybe. A couple of weeks later, when I was dropping Melody off after my week with her, Sophie told me that the DNA test showed that Jacob was actually Daniel Levesque's child. She looked very sad as she told me this. I guess, for her, it was the last proof that she had hurt me, and I could see she felt very ashamed. I'm so sorry, Chris. I know I've said it many times, but there are no words strong enough to say how bad I feel about this. This baby should have been yours. I could not explain why then, but I felt a little relieved to hear that Daniel was the father. At least she had not been careless with others she couldn't even remember. Still, I was surprised that I cared at all. Half of me thought Daniel might move in with Sophie, and the two would become a couple. So I hired a private investigator to find out as much as possible about this man. Not because I wanted to spy on him or check the real relationship between him and Sophie, but I knew he would spend time around Melody, and I needed to make sure he was a good person and that my daughter was safe around him. The investigator told me Daniel was 34, a little older than both Sophie and me. He worked as a freelance editor for children's school books. I felt a little uneasy when I read that he was single. There was a picture of him with a light beard. Somehow he looked familiar, like someone I had seen from time to time, but I couldn't remember where or when. Was he someone who had been close to Sophie longer than she said, or someone she knew better than she admitted? This made my uneasiness grow. Was I jealous? No. I told myself, no. There was no reason to be jealous since Sophie and I were about to be officially separated. Still, I pushed those thoughts away. The report said he had a brother who lived far away, in Coudjouac, in northern Quebec. The investigator followed Daniel for 2 weeks. Daniel went to Sophie's place every day, but had not moved in. He did not even stay overnight. Maybe they were not really a couple after all. Months passed. Sophie took Melody and Jacob to her parents' place on Christmas Eve. On Christmas Day, I went to Sophie's house to pick up Melody. That was the first time I saw Daniel face to face. He was finishing getting Jacob ready to take him along. I was still very angry at Daniel, and he noticed that. There was also a strange feeling between us, like we knew each other better than we should. I saw Daniel look surprised when I took off my frosted glasses. Still, I managed to shake his hand politely and say some civil words, even though all I wanted was to show him how upset I was. After Daniel and Jacob left, Sophie said casually, "I never realized how much the two of you look alike. It's almost creepy." This made me think. That must be why I felt that strange familiarity. Could Daniel and I be related? Probably not. The DNA tests showed there was no blood connection between Jacob and me, so it seemed almost impossible for Daniel to be related to me. Yet the resemblance was clear. "Daddy," Melody called happily when she saw me coming down the stairs. "Hello, my little flower," I said, picking her up. "Dad missed you so much," she said. "Look, Dad, her name is Zaza," she said, proudly showing me her new doll. "Daniel gave it to me." This felt like a punch in the stomach. Daniel was supposed to be my enemy, yet he had bought my daughter a nice Christmas present. I felt awkward. I couldn't even bring myself to look at his son. Sophie and I helped Melody get dressed to go outside. It was very cold. Sophie hugged Melody and then kissed me on the cheek. I saw tears in her eyes as Melody and I left. Christmas dinner with my parents was always a big event. Both my mother's and my father's families had always gotten along well. They were like one big group of good friends. My mother's older brother and his wife were close friends with my father's only sister and her husband. They had first met at my parents' wedding and had stayed close ever since. "You seem quiet, son. Is everything okay?" my father asked. He was a retired human resource manager, so he was good at reading people. I didn't want to go deep into my feelings, but I knew he wouldn't stop until I said something. I told him about how Daniel looked so much like me, and how strange it felt that he had given Melody a gift. Dad listened carefully. Then, in his calm way, he helped me see the situation more clearly. "Well, first, son, here is your answer to the big why question. That night, Sophie was with him, and because he looked so much like you, it was easier for him to get close to her. And about feeling bad for not being kinder to Daniel when he comes by with Melody, remember? You didn't take anything from him. You are not the one who caused the problem. He is." My dad's words took a few days to sink in, like medicine that needs time to work. After some months, I started to feel more okay with the whole situation. I did not feel as angry at Daniel anymore. A week after Jacob's first birthday, I had a talk with Melody. She was 4 years old then. She spoke clearly for her age. I asked, "Melody, when Daniel comes to your house, does he stay a long time? Does he eat dinner with you sometimes?" "No, he never stays. He just picks up Jacob and takes him back," she said. "So, Daniel and your mom are not close friends?" "No, they talk a little, but only about Jacob," she said. "Is he nice to you?" I asked. "Yes. He always says hello and asks me what I did during the week, but he never asks more because he doesn't stay long," she answered. "Okay. Does your mother feel sad after he leaves?" "Yes. She cries because she misses Jacob, but she cries more when you leave." We were stopped by a knock at the door. It was Jasmine, the neighbor's daughter, who wanted to play with Melody. I said, Go play with her." So, Sophie still wasn't over me. That thought gave me a strange kind of pleasure. I thought she would get over me one day accepting what had happened, because there was no way I would go back to her to raise another man's child. I believed the space between my new apartment and my old life was like a strong wall I could not cross. But I was about to learn an important truth. Some people don't let go without trying to come back. At exactly 2 a.m., the sharp buzzing of my phone broke the silence in my room. I didn't jump or move quickly. I just opened my eyes. The dark room surrounded me. I reached out, found the phone on the table, and looked at the bright blue-white light of the screen. It was Sophie. I touched the green button and put the cold screen to my ear. I didn't say hello. I just waited, listening to the shaky sound from the other side of the city. Chris, thank God you answered." Sophie's voice was high and shaky, almost like she was very upset. Behind her quick, uneven breathing, the loud, rushing sound of water crackled sharply through the phone. It was like a big pipe had burst inside a metal room. "Talk to me," I said, my voice cold and clear, without any tiredness or kindness. "A pipe broke in the basement right under the guest bed," she gasped, her breaths short and rough. "The water is rising fast and it's freezing cold. It's everywhere." "And what do you want me to do about it at 2 in the morning?" I asked, staring at the dark ceiling above my bed. "Please, you have to come over. I don't know what to do. The wall is already falling apart." Before she could say more, a man's voice shouted sharply over the sound of the rushing water. It was Daniel. "Tell him to come here and fix this. This noise is keeping me awake, Sophie." His rude demand hung between us. The sound of Sophie's heavy boots splashing hurriedly in the water filled the short silence on the phone. "Chris, I'm begging you. Please help me." I sat up slowly. I leaned my back against the cold leather headboard. My breath stayed steady. My heart didn't speed up. "The main water shutoff valve is on the left wall, right behind the water heater," I said, my voice calm and mechanical. "I can't reach it. It's too dark, and the water is up to my calves," she cried, her fear clear over the speaker. "The emergency plumber's number is on the fridge, exactly where I put it 6 months ago under the magnet." "Chris, you can't just leave me like this. You know this house better than anyone." "Good night, Sophie." I moved the phone away from my ear. I pressed the red button, switched the phone to silent, and laid it face down on the bed. I closed my eyes and fell asleep again. 7 a.m. The strong smell of burnt coffee and greasy food filled the small diner downtown. Mike sat across from me in a cracked vinyl booth, his heavy coat collar turned up against the cold air slipping in through the window. The morning light was gray and hard. I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket and pulled out a thick, plain manila envelope. I slid it carefully across the sticky table. It bumped against the base of his coffee cup with a dull thud. Mike didn't look up. He opened the envelope with his big thumb, his eyes narrowing as he saw the neat stacks of $100 bills inside, tied tightly together. "I need you back to work right away," I said, resting my arms on the edge of the table and not paying attention to the waitress walking by. Mike slid the envelope smoothly into his coat pocket, the money hidden away. "Who are we going after?" he asked. "The Levesque brothers, Daniel and Mark. I want everything about them torn apart." He raised one thick, scarred eyebrow and sipped his black coffee slowly, thinking it over. You already got rid of the wife. You left with your daughter safe. What else is there to prove? That was just the beginning, I said. Now, I want a full look at their whole lives. I tapped my finger hard against the worn wooden table. Look into all their money stuff, bank accounts, properties, hidden debts, find out who really controls them. So you want to find their weak spot? He said, setting his mug down and pulling out a worn notebook from his shirt pocket. I want to know exactly what keeps them worried, I said, and who they owe money to. Mike clicked his pen on the notebook. These guys usually have plenty of skeletons. Give me 3 days to dig through everything. I stood, fixing my cuffs, and dropped a $20 bill on the table to pay for our drinks. Don't call me until you have something solid, I said, buttoning my jacket. Without looking back, I walked out into the cold morning wind. Friday, 4 p.m. The sound of my office door shutting kept out all the noise from the busy engineering firm. Mike walked past the chairs and dropped a thick, plain black binder right in the middle of my clear glass desk. I opened it up, and inside were marked bank papers, blurry pictures, and complicated charts about cryptocurrency. You planned this perfectly, Mike said, walking across my office without small talk. They're losing control from all sides. Give me the quick summary, I said, looking at a notice written in red saying Mark Levesque was close to losing everything. Mark Levesque is almost bankrupt. He lost his job at Apex Corp and is now blacklisted in the field. His accounts overseas have nothing left. I nodded without feeling anything and turned to the next page. And the other brother? Daniel? Even worse, Mike said. Daniel is deep in trouble from bad gambling. He owes a lot of money, about $100,000, to a dangerous group near the port. Mike pointed to a blurry photo stuck to the papers. The picture showed Daniel being pushed hard against a wet brick wall by 2 men wearing heavy jackets and covered in tattoos. He's in trouble, Chris, Mike said. The loan sharks are closing in on him. They give him weekly warnings before things get worse. He's running out of chances. I looked closely at the transaction records and spotted something odd. What else did you find? You're not telling me everything? Mike stopped moving. He leaned over the glass desk, serious. I found a big, obvious problem in your ex-wife's story. He spread out a large, laminated city map over my desk, holding it down with staplers. This red area is where Daniel usually hangs out, Mike said, pointing to a group of blocks. Cheap bars, small poker games, pawn shops. Then he moved his finger to the opposite side of the city. This blue circle shows the fancy teacher's lounge where Sophie was that Thursday night. He tapped the map hard with his knuckles. A broke gambler doesn't just drive 15 miles to buy expensive drinks in a place he can't pay for. The pieces fell together in my head like a puzzle, clear and frightening. The random meeting, the mistake. He didn't just meet her by chance, I said in a low, calm voice. He planned it. Sunday evening. The grocery store parking lot was bright and neutral, chosen by our lawyers for the custody exchange. The air smelled of cold car fumes and wet pavement. Sophie's SUV stopped 2 spots away. She opened the door looking worn out. Dark circles under her eyes, pale face, her hair tied back messily. The stress from the flooded house showed in every part of her. I got out of my car, standing straight, silent, and unreadable. Melody stepped out of Sophie's SUV, holding tight to her pink backpack. She looked down at the ground. She didn't run to me like usual. Her small shoulders were hunched and her body was closed off. I walked past Sophie without a word and took Melody's bag from her hands. Let's go, sweetie. Sophie moved around the open car door, trying to smile, tired and worried. Chris, about the flood the other night, I just want to explain. I turned away quickly. I opened the back door of my car for my daughter, ignoring her words. Get in and buckle up, I said gently but firmly. I slammed the door, cutting off Sophie before she could finish her sentence. I got in the car, put it in drive, and quickly pulled out without looking back. 10 minutes later, the quiet inside the car felt heavy and uncomfortable. Streetlights flickered softly on the dashboard. I glanced in the mirror and saw her tense face sitting in the back. What's wrong, Mel? You're very quiet today, I said. She held tightly to her seatbelt with both hands, pulling it close to her chest. I don't like it when Mommy's friend is around, she said softly. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until it creaked lightly. Why? I asked carefully. Uncle Daniel looks mean when he looks at me. she whispered, looking down at her shoes. He threw his phone on the wall and yelled at me because I dropped my puzzle pieces. A cold feeling ran through me. The air in the car seemed to grow colder. He yelled at you? I asked, keeping my voice calm while my hands gripped the wheel tightly. He told me to be quiet and go to my room, she said quietly, a tear slipping down her cheek. I knew then something had gone too far. This person was no longer just unwelcome. Now, he was a real problem for my family. I needed to act. It was Tuesday, 10 a.m. I sat in a glass-walled boardroom at the top floor of Apex Corp's headquarters. The room smelled of polished wood and nerves. Across from me sat Valerie, Apex's sharp lawyer. She wore a dark suit and sat very straight, looking confident and tough. She was a fierce competitor in this business world. Your suggested liability clause for the European project is not acceptable, Chris, Valerie said, sliding my marked-up contract back toward me. It's normal in the industry, Valerie. You're pushing too hard with penalties to cover your own supply problems, I replied, leaning forward to make my point. I don't care about what's normal. I want to protect Apex from mistakes by others, she said firmly. If you insist on a 5% penalty, we will remove the entire maintenance service, I said, holding her gaze. You'll lose your backup support immediately. Your board will blame you for the loss. Valerie didn't flinch. She looked at me coldly for 3 long seconds, searching for a sign of weakness. You're pretending, she said calmly. Your quarterly profit depends a lot on that specific maintenance level. You need our money. Try me, I said, my face set like stone. I'll leave this room right now, cancel the offer, and let your servers fail when the European grid changes, she warned. She tapped her silver pen on the table in a steady rhythm. A small, sharp smile appeared on her lips. She knew I was firm. All right. We'll limit the penalty to 2%. But you must promise a solid physical response team in Europe within 48 hours. Agreed. I slid the new agreement back without a second thought. We signed the thick stacks of papers quickly. The only sound was the scratching of our pens. The room felt tense, like a battle. But things got done. Valerie snapped her leather folder shut loudly. You're tough in talks. You don't give others any space to breathe. I don't leave results to luck, and I don't give in easily, I said, standing and fixing my tie. Let me buy you a drink, Chris, she said, her voice softer now. Just after work, you've earned it. I glanced at my watch and met her eyes. Lead the way. The fancy lobby bar on the ground floor was dim and smelled of old whiskey, polished wood, and expensive perfume. Quiet talks filled the space, letting us feel private. We sat in a deep leather corner booth. Heavy crystal glasses sat between us on a small marble table. You tore apart my junior counsel yesterday. It was hard to watch, she said, slowly sipping her drink, eyes watching me over the glass. He missed a big mistake in the indemnity clause, I said. So I fixed it clearly. Valerie smiled, swirling the amber liquid around the ice. The ice clicked softly. Always the practical one. Is your personal life as careful and sharp as your work? I picked up my glass, holding the heavy cup. It's about to be. She put her glass down gently, leaning forward with her elbows on the table. Tell me more. I enjoy a tough story. I don't want a simple family lawyer, I said, dropping the polite talk. My voice got serious and cold. I want someone who fights hard, knows how to handle difficult battles, and doesn't follow the usual rules. Valerie's body language changed right away. The relaxed mood left the booth. What was left was sharp and focused, like ready for a challenge. A custody battle? She asked, her voice lowering. Your ex-wife let someone with serious problems into her home. Yesterday, he went too far with your daughter. Do you want a simple review of the agreement to change visitation, or do you want to fight completely? I want full legal and physical custody, no questions asked, I said, leaning forward. And I want that person gone, legally and financially. Valerie didn't hesitate. She reached into the inside pocket of her smart jacket and took out a thick black business card. She slid it slowly across the shiny marble table. This is my private practice, she said quietly. I don't advertise, I don't settle, and I don't lose. I picked up the card. The silver letters stood out on the heavy, expensive paper. The plan was ready. The expert was hired. Call my private line at 8 a.m. tomorrow, Valerie ordered, picking up her glass and drinking the rest of her bourbon in one firm motion. "We start then." I watched her leave the dark lounge. The sharp sound of her heels faded into the quiet buzz of people talking and networking. The wait was over. It was time to fight back. At exactly 8 a.m., the heavy wooden door to Valerie's private office opened, shutting out the noise of the busy streets. I walked past the empty reception desk and went straight inside. She sat behind a huge, clean desk. Behind her were tall metal cabinets full of neat files organized by color. Today, she wore a new outfit, a sharp navy blue suit, and she was already looking at me without saying a word. I placed my leather briefcase on the desk, clicked it open, and took out a printed plan. I spread the paper across the desk, holding down the curling corners with my hands. "This is not just a family problem, Valerie," I said, leaning over her desk. "Think of it like a hostile takeover in business." Valerie leaned in, her eyes scanning the paper full of details and timelines I had worked on all night. "I see a heavily risked asset, your daughter, living in a risky place right now," she said in a calm, steady voice. "The mother is unreliable. The new person is linked to trouble and has bad connections." She leaned back in her chair, twisting her hands together. "You've described the risks perfectly. Now let's talk about the legal problem." "He has no right," I said, standing firm. "He's just staying on my old couch. He hasn't paid a single cent for that place." "Wrong!" Valerie snapped, her voice sharp like broken glass. "If he officially moves his stuff in and makes that his main address, the clock starts. Common law residency." The words felt bitter to say. "Exactly. If he becomes a resident, he uses your court-ordered support payments to cover his secret gambling debts." She pulled out a heavy pen and tapped it against the desk. "Even worse, he gets tenant rights. Getting him out would become a long, difficult process with courts and local police." My jaw tightened. "If he gets tenant rights, he forces Melody to be around him all the time. I won't let that happen." "Burning the house down is messy, Chris," Valerie said without blinking, looking right at me without any warm feeling. "We use paper and rules. It's more effective and leaves no trace." She tapped the pen on the table, stressing her point. "We have to turn his presence into a weapon against her now." She pulled a clean legal pad and wrote in bold letters, "Toxic environment." "Family courts usually favor the mother. It's old-fashioned but very real," she said calmly. "Having a boyfriend with a gambling problem isn't enough to take away custody." "He shouted at my daughter and threw something during her," I reminded her, seeing Melody's sad, small shoulders in my mind. "That's enough. Stories from a 4-year-old won't hold up in court against a strong lawyer," she said. "We need clear, solid proof." I looked at my cuffs and back at her. "What do you mean by solid proof?" "Audio or video recordings, police reports, proof that drugs were in the house. We need an undeniable case that shows the mother is not fit and neglectful." I nodded slowly. The plan started to come to me clearly. I imagined watching my old home, waiting to catch evidence. "Your job is to gather the proof, Chris," Valerie said, pointing the pen at my chest. "But don't do anything yet. Don't threaten her. Don't send angry messages. Keep everything quiet and collected." "And when we have enough?" "We use it all at once. We ask the court for an emergency order." We took away her care and control all in one afternoon, skipping the usual waiting time for talks. "The plan is set," I said. I rolled up the files and put them in my briefcase, closing it firmly. I turned toward the door. "Chris," Valerie said, her voice low and serious, "don't let your feelings make you careless. Think about the long run." I stopped with my hand on the cool doorknob. "I am not angry, Valerie. I have a clear goal." I opened the heavy wooden door and left, the fight ahead now clear and set. It was midnight. My plain apartment was very quiet. The only light came from the bright screen of my laptop on the kitchen counter. Mike stood next to me, wearing a thick coat that smelled like old cigarettes and wet streets. He pulled a small black flash drive from his pocket and plugged it into my laptop. "It took me $2,000 in bribes to the bar manager to get this from their backup," Mike said, his rough fingers typing a long password. "I don't care about the price," I said, watching the screen load. "Play it." The video started. It was grainy and dark, the camera at the bar struggling with the neon lights, but clear enough for what we needed. The date in the corner showed it was a Thursday night from exactly 1 year ago. Look at the shadow near the service station. That's Daniel. Mike pointed at a dark corner in the video. A man sat still on a stool, not moving. He had been there for 2 hours, just drinking tap water before Sophie even came in. My jaw tightened as I watched. The glass doors of the bar opened. My ex-wife and her co-worker, Chantal, came in laughing, taking off their light jackets. "Skip to 11:15 p.m., Mike told the player, his hand ready on the keyboard. The video jumped ahead quickly. Sophie and Chantal stood up from their stools. They left their partly finished wine glasses on the polished counter and walked away toward the restrooms. Daniel moved out of the shadows. His steps were smooth and careful, almost like he had done this many times before. He walked down the bar. When he got close to their stools, he bumped into a waiter who was carrying a full tray. The waiter stumbled and turned his back while trying to steady the drinks. This gave a quick 2-second moment when the bartender couldn't see Sophie's seat. In that short time, Daniel's left hand moved over Sophie's glass of red wine. "Stop right there. Zoom in," I said, leaning close to the glowing screen. Mike pressed a key, stopping the video and making that moment clearer. A small, folded white paper was easy to see between Daniel's thumb and finger. I looked carefully as he poured a fine white powder into the red drink. The powder disappeared right away. My breath froze. The room felt colder. "This wasn't an accident," I said quietly, my voice sounding hard even to me. "It was something planned." "Keep watching," I said without looking away from the screen. The video started again. Sophie and Chantal came back to the bar. Sophie sat down, not knowing anything was wrong with her drink. She lifted the glass and drank the wine. The clock on the screen moved forward. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. By 15 minutes, Sophie looked weak and lost her balance. She leaned hard against the stool, clearly in trouble, and unable to hold herself up. Chantal looked around, pretending she didn't understand. Daniel quickly stepped in. He gently held Sophie by the waist, acting like he was trying to help her stay steady. "His plan worked perfectly," Mike said, stopping the video on Daniel's face as he helped Sophie towards the door. "But look at him closely." I looked at the frozen picture, the neat short beard and the clean hairstyle. In the dim light, with Sophie's mind clouded by the powder, Daniel looked just like me. A scary copy made to look like me. Mike reached inside his coat and pulled out a worn folder. He put several glossy photos on the counter. These were taken by a city traffic camera 3 weeks before the bar incident. I flipped through them. The pictures showed Daniel walking outside in daylight. He had no beard and a tight military haircut. He looked nothing like me there. He grew the beard. He changed his hairstyle to look exactly like yours, Mike said, placing the photos next to the frozen video image. "He studied you carefully and copied your look perfectly." He pretended to be the only safe place her confused mind would trust, I said, putting together the awful plan behind it all. "He didn't just hurt your wife, Chris," Mike said quietly. "He planned a cruel mind game." "Why?" I asked, looking up from the hard countertop. "A small-time gambler who owes big debts wouldn't spend weeks getting ready just for a random night at a bar. There's no money in it." "No, he wouldn't," Mike agreed, tapping the phone with his finger. "But a brother wanting revenge would." I stared at the frozen video. The image of Daniel's disguised face stuck in my mind. "Mark lost his job, his good name in the business, and his big pension because you beat him with that European contract," Mike explained the timeline, everything fitting together perfectly. "He couldn't win against me at work," I said, the truth sinking in slowly. "So he sent his brother to ruin my life. It was planned. To break your marriage, shake your personal world, and lower your work focus so Apex could take back the deal after everything fell apart." That cruel, thought-out plan weighed heavily in the quiet kitchen air. Sophie wasn't unfaithful or looking for excitement. She was an easy, trusting pawn, caught in a bigger fight between companies. "They used my face to hurt my wife and tear my family apart." My voice was cold and low. It felt empty, like a heavy door slamming shut inside me. I stood up slow and pushed the metal stool back quietly on the wooden floor. "I need a moment," I told Mike. I turned and walked with calm steps down the hall to the guest bathroom. The floor felt steady under my feet. I moved measured and steady. I walked inside, closed the thick wooden door, and locked the deadbolt with a sharp click. I stood in the middle of the room, looking up at my reflection in the large mirror above the sink. The same dark eyes, the same neat beard, the same haircut, the exact face the attacker had hidden behind while tearing my life apart. I looked deep into my own eyes and imagined the man who took everything from me, his hostile look placed over my own. The weight in my chest grew fast, an explosion of anger that needed to come out. It was so strong, I felt it could break me inside. But I did not yell. I did not curse. I did not cry. I hit the mirror hard with my right fist, right in the middle. The thick glass cracked loudly. It sounded like a loud bang in the small bathroom. Pieces of sharp glass fell on the sink and the clean white tile floor. A sharp piece cut deep into the skin of my index and middle fingers. Blood quickly came out, dropping steadily onto the spotless white counter. I stood still among the broken glass. I breathed in slowly through my nose, filling my lungs fully, and breathed out hard through my mouth. I focused on calming my fast heartbeat, bringing it down to calm. I used my left hand to turn on the cold water. I held my hurt right hand under the cool stream, watching the water change pink and flow down the metal drain. The bleeding slowed to a small drip. I opened the medicine cabinet and took out a fresh roll of white athletic tape. I carefully wrapped it tightly around the cuts, holding my fingers steady so they wouldn't move. I grabbed a thick dark towel from the heated rack and wiped every drop of blood off the sink and the metal taps. Then I knelt and picked up all the broken glass, putting it into the small metal trash bin. I used a wet paper towel to clean the whole floor. The sink area was now clean again, except for the empty mirror frame hanging on the wall. I stood up and fixed the cuffs of my dress shirt, pulling the sleeves down just right to hide the white tape on my knuckles. When I opened the door and walked into the kitchen, I held myself perfectly straight. My face showed nothing, calm and unreadable. Mike saw the taped hand and the tiny blood spot on my shirt cuff. He looked up at my face but didn't ask what happened. "We take this straight to the police," he said, pointing to the frozen laptop screen. "Aggravated assault, use of a harmful substance, kidnapping. That's serious trouble." "No," I said, going to the liquor cabinet. I poured a large glass of scotch with my unhurt left hand. The bottle made a soft sound against the glass. "Are you crazy? That tape means he's going away for a long time," Mike said sharply. "The tape is a year old, Mike," I said, leaning back against the kitchen counter. "The time limit for the smaller charges is unclear in this area, and there is no test to show what the powder really was that night. A good defense lawyer will say he just put headache medicine or sugar in her drink because she said she had a bad headache," Mike said, folding his strong arms across his chest. "They will drag the trial out for years, using all kinds of legal tricks." "Right. I won't let Melody go through a public, stressful fight in the news while that man stays free on bail for 3 years. "So you're just going to let him get away?" Mike asked in surprise. I took a slow sip of scotch. The warm drink felt strong and sharp as it went down my throat. It helped me stay calm and focused. "I'm going to make sure he pays." "How?" "You just said the courts won't help." "The court needs proof, that leaves no doubt," I said, setting my glass down hard on the counter. The sound was quick and clear on the stone surface. "But the group he owes money to at the port? They don't need proof." Mike's eyes got a little bigger as he understood my plan. "You want to use his debt against him?" "Yes. I'm going to speak the only language he understands. Greed." I closed my laptop. The bright screen went dark and the kitchen became quiet and low-lit again. "We're not calling the police. We're setting a trap, and he will fall for it, asking for the bait." I looked at Mike, my voice becoming cold and firm. "Find out exactly how the group gets their money." The words stayed in the quiet, plain air of my kitchen even after Mike nodded, pulled up his coat collar, and left. I stayed standing in the dark, feeling the tape wrapped tightly around my injured knuckles as I slowly clenched my fist. My plan for revenge was no longer just an idea written on paper. It felt real and ready to start. 6 a.m. A sharp vibration from my phone woke me. It was a secure message from Mike, lighting up the dark room. "Check your blocked inbox. The port group just sent a notice." I threw off the heavy blanket, skipped making coffee, and turned on my laptop on the kitchen island. Using my unhurt hand, I typed a long password into the screen. A poor quality video opened. The sound was mostly wind roaring at the harbor, mixed with the heavy sounds of containers being moved. Daniel was on his knees. His face was pressed hard against an old rusty chain-link fence. His eyes were wide and filled with fear. A large man stood nearby, seen only by the dirty sleeves of his heavy cloth jacket. The man held a large pair of bolt cutters right in front of Daniel's face. The metal jaws opened and closed with a loud, heavy sound. 30 days, Levesque, a deep voice said through the wind. I promise the money will come. Just give me 1 month, Daniel begged, his voice breaking. The strong, confident act he had shown before disappeared, leaving only a scared, desperate person. 30 days, or we cut the arm at the elbow and sell the other to cover the debt. The video went black suddenly. I closed the screen. My own face reflected in the dark monitor, calm and not showing any fear for my half-brother. The situation was locked tight. Now, it was time to act. I called Mike on a secure line. He answered right away. He has only 1 month before they do something terrible to him, I said, walking to the large windows to watch the cars below. He'll panic, Mike said through some static. He'll take from anyone nearby just to save himself. He's also going to try to take from what I have left, I replied, tracing a line on the glass with my finger. I need someone listening inside that house right now. Wiretapping without permission is a serious crime, Chris, Mike warned. I'm not tapping the house. I'm protecting my daughter's things. It was Friday afternoon, the day Melody's custody week was about to start. I sat at my old wooden workbench in the spare room. A soft, expensive stuffed bear lay under the bright light of a small magnifier. I took a small, sharp blade and carefully cut a small, clean slit in the bear's back seam. From a special static-proof bag on the table, I took out a tiny military-grade voice recorder. It was a small, matte black box, no bigger than a matchbook. It could work for 3 weeks and send secure audio straight to my private server over cell towers. I hid the device deep inside the soft stuffing, making sure it was far from the outside where a child might touch it. Using thick nylon thread, I carefully sewed the bear back up, pulling the stitches tight so no signs were left behind. The door to the spare room made a soft creak as it opened. Melody stood in the hallway, her small pink backpack already on her shoulders. Is it time to go to Mommy's? She asked. Her voice was calm, with none of the bright energy she used to have before everything changed. I picked up the bear and walked over to her, kneeling down to be at her eye level. I handed her the stuffed animal. I got you a protector. His name is Titan. She took the bear and hugged it tightly to her chest. He's heavy. He's strong, I said, fixing the straps on her backpack. He's going to listen to everything and keep you safe. Can he come to the living room with me? She asked quietly. He goes everywhere you go, especially the living room. About 20 minutes later, I drove her to the meeting spot in the grocery store parking lot. Sophie was already there by her SUV. Her hands shook a little as she took Melody's bag. She looked very tired, her cheeks pale under the bright parking lights. I said nothing. I didn't nod or look at her. I stood by my car, stiff and still, watching Melody go through the front doors of the place I now thought of as the enemy's home. It was midnight. My living room was dark. The only light came from the blue glow of the laptop on my knees. I wore large, noise-canceling headphones, adjusting the sound levels on the screen. The digital system was ready. Suddenly, the audio feed turned on, picked up by sounds in Sophie's living room. I'm going to federal prison, Sophie! Daniel's voice rose, full of panic and anger. Daniel, please lower your voice. You'll wake the kids, Sophie said softly. She sounded worn out, almost a whisper compared to his loud panic. My publishing partner cheated me. If I don't pay $100,000 by the end of the month, I'm finished, he shouted, pacing around the room. I smiled quietly to myself. Federal prison? A publishing partner? These were just stories. Real trouble didn't come with badges or court papers. He was making up desperate excuses to hide his gambling debts. I don't have that kind of money, Sophie said softly, probably crying with her face in her hands. You have this big house. Refinance the mortgage, he said, his anger sharp and cruel. I can't. Chris still pays half the mortgage. It breaks our agreement. He'll take me to court. To hell with Chris, he snapped. I'm the one raising his child while he lives in a fancy apartment, Daniel shouted. The loud bang of his fist hitting a wooden table shook my headphones so hard I had to wince. If you don't do what I say, I'll take Jacob. I'll bring him back to Kuujjuaq, and you'll never see your son again. A sharp, scared noise from Sophie cut through the sound. It was a cruel way to control the situation, used perfectly. You can't do that! He's just a baby! She begged, her voice full of fear. I could hear her knees hit the floor. Try me, Daniel said coldly. Pay my bail, or say goodbye to him. I quickly pressed a key. The software saved the audio clip perfectly. I moved the file into a secure folder and labeled it, Extortion and Flight Risk. 2 nights later, 2:15 a.m. My small recorder sent a red emergency alert to my phone, shaking hard on the nightstand. I sat up fast and touched the screen to see the live sound. The noise from the house was wild and rough. A loud crash came through the speakers, a plate breaking on the wall. Where's my watch? Daniel yelled, his voice angry and shaking. I don't know. I didn't touch it, Sophie cried out. I heard her running away on the floor. A high, scared cry came from upstairs. Melody was awake. The sudden urge to grab my car keys, drive fast, force open their door, and stop Daniel burned inside me. My body filled with shock and tension. I stood and walked across the dark room. My hand floated just above the car keys on the counter. My jaw tightened. Don't let anger take control. Valerie's calm voice warned me inside my head. I pulled back my hand. I sat on a stool, my teeth pressed together tightly in the quiet room. I pressed my headphones closer, not looking away from the dark. Through the feed, I heard a clear, sharp click of a lighter, then the hiss of a glass pipe being lit. Heavy, uneven breaths followed. Daniel was smoking, alone in the middle of the room. Melody's quiet crying came from the other room, just faint enough to almost break my mind. Every part of me wanted to act out in anger, but I didn't rush in. I stayed calm and careful. I didn't let him have the chance to blame me. Instead, I saved the files, locked them with strong protection, and marked the time of every bad thing that happened in that room. I had proof. The next morning, I sat in a fancy private dining room on the top floor of the company's main office. The room smelled of expensive leather, roasted garlic, and success. Mr. Roy sat opposite me at a shiny wooden table, cutting a big piece of steak carefully. The work in Europe is going great, Chris. You're unstoppable, he said, pointing his fork at me. I need a special favor, one you won't find in any company records, I said, skipping the small talk and not touching my food. He stopped eating, set his knife down softly, and wiped his mouth with a clean napkin. I'm listening. I need your contacts for banking outside the country in the Caymans. I want to create a fake company under their system by noon. Why do you need that fake company? He asked, watching me closely. It's for a pretend investment fund called Titan Investments. It will deal with crypto and real estate. Mr. Roy slowly wiped his mouth and leaned back in his chair. Sounds like a trap. No, it's a planned move, I said. It has to look real, with a working website that I control. If this goes back to our company, the regulators will destroy us before the quarter ends. It won't happen. The internet address is linked to a dead server far away, but I need your registered agent to make it fast, without the usual 30-day wait. He looked at me, thinking about the risk to the company and the millions I just helped bring in. I'll make the call, he said quietly, picking his knife back up. But Chris, whoever you're going after, make sure they can't come back. When the Titan site goes dark, I said, standing up and fixing my jacket, they won't be ready for what comes next. Later that Friday, in a quiet, fancy steakhouse downtown, Valerie sat across from me in a soft, private booth. She wore a red dress that caught people's eyes, but she kept hers on the table. I reached into my pocket and slid a heavy USB drive across the white tablecloth. It stopped just an inch from her glass. Here's everything you asked for, I said, slicing a piece of my ribeye steak. Threats, plans to take someone against their will, proof of family trouble, and drug use near a child. Valerie picked up the small drive and rolled it between her neat fingers. She glanced at the white tape wrapped around my knuckles under my cuff, then looked into my eyes. "You really stayed calm," she said, showing a rare sign of respect. "Almost everyone would have lost control and made things worse." "I don't act without thinking," I said. "I plan every step." She smiled, her look sharp and strong under the restaurant's lights. "You know limits better than most judges I face in court. A man without strong limits lets people take advantage. I learned that the hard way." I took a sip of my wine, its smooth taste pushing away the sharp feeling of stress and adrenaline. "So, what's the next step?" she asked, putting the USB drive in her purse. "Do we get the emergency order on Monday and take your daughter away?" "No. We wait," I said, putting down my fork. "Daniel needs to find a way to pay off his debts." Valerie tilted her head, her mind racing to keep up. "You're going to let him try to take what belongs to her?" "I'm going to let him try. I'll give him the perfect chance. Then I'll change everything for good." She raised her glass, holding it over the table. I met it with mine. The glasses touched with a clear, sharp sound that broke the quiet. "You're a scary man, Chris," she said quietly. "Only to those who cross the line." I finished my wine and set the glass down on the white tablecloth. As Chris lays his final plan in this story of justice, the question remains: is his calm and careful way right after all the hurt he's faced? Or is it stepping over a dangerous line? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear what you think about Chris, Sophie, and their complicated story. If you're loving this tale of trust and revenge, please like and subscribe to Cheating Heart Stories to follow what happens next. Remember, though betrayal can break us and leave us feeling lost, it also gives us a chance to rebuild with strong, unbreakable limits. True strength doesn't come from angry, sudden reactions. It comes from staying calm, strong, and focused, keeping your peace and outsmarting your problems. Stay steady, keep your goals high, and always remember, it's up to you to build your own amazing comeback. The mental trap was set. Now, it was time to give the trouble its chance. This came in the form of the VIP lounge at the city's biggest casino, exactly one day later, Saturday night. I sat alone at a private baccarat table, hidden in the dark corner of the room. A glass of whiskey sat quietly in front of me, a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece fit snugly in my right ear, connecting me to Mike's private channel. Mike was 3 tables away, under the bright lights of the busy casino floor. He was playing a careful role, a flashy, new, rich gambler, acting loud and bold. His suit was too bright, and a big gold watch hung on his wrist. "The person we want is here," Mike whispered very softly. The small microphone near him caught his voice over the noisy sounds of chips and players. "He's nervous, looking all around, trying to find the right table to save his luck." I kept my eyes on the dealer, who was moving cards smoothly on the green table. "Start the plan," I said quietly. Mike quickly gathered a huge pile of expensive chips. He left his table and walked toward the bar, moving just right. As Daniel hurried past some slot machines, looking scared and nervous, Mike bumped into his shoulder hard. Chips worth hundreds of dollars fell and rolled across the carpet everywhere. "Hey! Be careful!" Daniel snapped, clearly stressed and angry, but then he saw the black and purple chips. Very valuable. He dropped to his knees and started picking them up fast, his worry turning into an urgent need. "Sorry, man. Keep those," Mike said loudly, his voice clear among the casino noise. He reached into his pocket and threw Daniel another black chip. "I'm already winning big tonight." Daniel froze. His eyes went wide as he saw all the chips still held by Mike. His excitement grew as his mind took over. 50 grand, Daniel said, his voice shaky. "At the tables?" "The tables? That's for beginners," Mike laughed, sounding proud and sure of himself. He leaned in close and lowered his voice like sharing a secret. "I just pulled out of Titan Investments, made 3 times my money in 30 days. This is my celebration cash." Mike took a sleek extra phone from his jacket pocket. He tapped the screen and showed Daniel a fake but very real-looking Titan client page. The screen glowed in the dark lounge, showing a huge multi-million-dollar balance in bright green numbers. "High return, offshore crypto, and commercial real estate," Mike said smoothly, putting the phone away before Daniel could look closely. "It's a closed group," By invite only. Daniel's breathing grew fast and shaky. You could see the strong need in him, even in the shadows. Invite only? Is there any way I can get in on that? Mike looked him up and down, his face turning cold and distant. I don't know you, kid. He turned away and raised his hand to get the bartender's attention. Look, I have money. I just need a quick deal, Daniel begged, stepping in front of Mike to stop him. Please, just one tip. One. Mike sighed, as if feeling sorry, but also careful. He reached into his coat, pulled out a silver pen, and wrote something on a cocktail napkin. Okay, short this small trade at 9 a.m. Monday, Mike said, sliding the napkin onto Daniel's chest. Take your profit and walk away. Monday, 9:05 a.m. I sat in my clean, glass-walled office, eyes fixed on the dashboard of the fake Titan server. A ping sounded. Daniel had just made the exact trade Mike told him using his last $500. A small, sad amount. Likely all he had left. I moved my mouse over the admin controls and changed the usual settings. I sent a command that put exactly $5,000 into Daniel's linked account right then. The balance lit up green. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick text to Mike. The bait is taken. The small trade just went through. At exactly 1 p.m., an alert from a hidden recorder inside the Trojan Bear device shocked my phone with a loud warning. I put on my headphones and joined the live audio. Daniel's voice burst through the speakers, wild and full of raw energy, as his heavy boots entered Sophie's kitchen. It works! Sophie, the fund is real! I just made $5,000 in 5 minutes from a burner tip! Daniel, please, keep it down. The baby is finally asleep, Sophie whispered, her voice full of deep tiredness from many hard days of stress. Forget the baby. I have the insider's direct contact, Daniel shouted, not paying attention to her. If we put $100,000 into Titan investments today, we can pay off my debt by Friday. We'd be free and clear. 100,000? Where would we even get that? She asked, her voice rising quickly with panic. The house! You have to refinance the house now. Call the bank right away, he said sharply. His mood changed fast from excitement to angry pressure. I can't. Chris still pays half the mortgage. It goes against the separation deal. He'll take me to court. Then get his signature, Daniel shouted. A glass broke loudly in the sink, making me flinch behind my headphones. Tell him it's for a business. Say whatever you must, or I'm finished, and I'm taking Jacob with me to Kujawak. Sophie gasped, scared. You can't do that. He's just a baby, she cried. Try me, Daniel said coldly. There was no kindness in his voice. Help me today or say goodbye to him forever. Sophie started crying hard, her sobs filling the kitchen. The threat worked completely. Tuesday, 2 p.m. I sat in a glass-walled private room in a fancy coffee shop downtown. The air smelled of strong coffee and fresh pastries. Sophie sat across a marble table. Her clothes looked worn and wrinkled, as if taken right from a laundry pile. Dark circles under her eyes showed how stressed she was. I slowly sipped my black espresso. I sat up straight, not saying hello or showing any kindness. Her hands trembled as she pushed a stack of legal papers toward me. Chris, I know I have no right to ask this, but please sign this, she said softly, her voice weak. I did not take the pen. I looked at the top sheet and read the bold words. It's to borrow $100,000 against the house equity I still partly pay for. It's for a new business, a safe investment that will secure Melody's future, she said, not meeting my eyes. I put the paper back down and laughed. The sound was cold and hard, with no humor. You're not starting any business, Sophie. You can't even manage a simple bank account. I leaned closer over the table, lowering my voice to a cold whisper. You're trying to pay off someone who is dangerous and causes trouble, so he doesn't get hurt by bad people at the port. Her face lost all color fast and looked pale, like old paper. Half that house was built with my hard work, extra hours, and deals in Europe. I tapped my finger firmly and slowly on the marble table. Not one penny of my share will pay for your mistakes or his bad choices. Chris, how do you know? She said, her voice shaking, filled with fear. I stood up. I slowly buttoned my suit jacket, looking down at how broken she looked. I know everything. I took a folded sheet of paper from inside my jacket. It was a printed copy of Daniel's debt records. I dropped the papers on top of her fake refinancing documents. The paper slapped hard on the marble. "Ask your partner about this," I said. Then I turned and left the glass room, leaving her frozen in the booth, staring without seeing at the proof of her lover's troubles. It was Tuesday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, hidden in a quiet street a few blocks away from my old house. The engine was off. A small recorder was live, playing sounds through my car speakers, filling the space with tense noise. The heavy front door opened loudly, bumping the frame. "Did you get the signature?" Daniel shouted, his boots thudding on the floor as he walked fast and angry. "You lied to me." Sophie's voice shook. She sounded mad, but mostly scared. "You owe $100,000 to dangerous people." "What are you talking about? Who said that?" Daniel yelled. "Chris knows it all. He has the ledger. You're not trying to build a future for us. You're just trying to save yourself," she said. "Give me that!" The sound of paper tearing sharply cut through the air. "You ruined everything. He was our only chance," Daniel shouted in panic, losing control. "Get out of my house! Leave before I call the police!" Sophie screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cracking. A sharp sound of a strong slap filled the speakers, then a heavy thud as Sophie fell to the floor, gasping and crying from shock. "Don't talk to me like that! I'm the only thing keeping you from total ruin!" Daniel shouted, standing over her. Inside my car, my jaw tightened until I could hear my teeth grinding. I grabbed the door handle tightly. My knuckles, still wrapped in white tape, turned pale. The urge to run out, cross those blocks, and end this nightmare burned inside me. But I stopped. Wait. Let the trap close. Valerie's serious warning made my body freeze, holding me tight in the leather seat. I pulled my hand away from the door handle and grabbed the leather steering wheel instead, squeezing hard until I heard it stretch. I sat still, staring blankly out the windshield. Below me, the mother of my child cried softly on the floor. The dream of their love was gone, broken beyond repair. Suddenly, heavy and quick footsteps rushed up the wooden stairs. I heard Daniel's urgent voice. "Where is it? Where is the code?" He moved fast in the bedroom, pulling drawers out and banging them against the walls. "Daniel, stop! Don't touch that!" Sophie shouted, running after him. The sharp sound of a metal tool hitting steel came through the microphone. The wall safe was being forced open. "This money is for Jacob's college. These are my grandmother's jewels. You can't take them!" Sophie cried. "Watch me!" Daniel growled angrily, like an animal with no way out. The sounds of jewelry boxes snapping open and cash being tossed into a bag filled the room. "Please, that's all I have. $40,000. It's everything," Sophie begged. There was a sound of fabric tearing as she tried to stop him. "It's an investment. I'll double it by Friday and bring it back," Daniel yelled, pushing her back roughly. Quick, heavy footsteps ran down the stairs, and the front door slammed shut hard, shaking the whole house. I stayed in my car. The microphone went silent except for Sophie's soft, broken sobs echoing through the empty room. He had fallen right into the trap. He had taken everything from her. I grabbed my phone and called Mike's secure number. "He's on his way to you," I said. "He has a bag full of stolen jewelry and money." "Start the intake protocol," Mike answered, then hung up. Wednesday morning came bright and clear at Valerie's clean, sunlit law office. The heavy oak door opened slowly. Mike walked in, carrying a big dark canvas bag. Without saying anything, he set the bag down hard on Valerie's perfect slate desk. The loud sound of metal and cash hitting the desk filled the quiet room. "He met me in a hidden alley at 2 in the morning, Mike said, as he quickly unzipped the bag. "He was begging me, on his knees in the dirt, to put it all into the Titan Fund right away." I stood and looked at the things spilling out onto the desk. Sophie's diamond bracelet and her grandmother's old heavy rings. Thick stacks of $100 bills lay neatly in front of us. It was all the money she had left to keep safe. "Did you send him the digital receipt?" I asked quietly, trying to sound calm. Mike smiled and crossed his arms. "He got a real secure email showing a $40,000 deposit into his fake Titan account," he said. Valerie slid a thick folder across the desk. "The money Daniel invested has been officially moved and checked through our offshore partner," she said, holding a shiny pen. She tapped on the signature line of the papers. "I've made the papers so all the money goes straight into a safe trust fund." I picked up the pen and read the bold words at the top. The Melody Harvey Educational Trust. The money stays in the family, I said, signing the papers firmly. Daniel thinks he just saved himself from trouble, Mike said, laughing quietly. But really, he just paid for your daughter's school. I gave the signed papers back to Valerie. The last safe shield was now in place. He has no money, no power, and his group's deadline is in 72 hours. I looked at the empty bag, feeling the weight of how things would end. We just let the problem destroy itself. 72 hours passed with total silence. I sent no messages, made no calls, offered no help that could give away our plan. I only waited. It was Friday morning, 8 a.m., the hard deadline for the syndicate at the port. I sat at my big glass desk in the corner office. Early sunlight glinted off the surface. My eyes stayed on the fake Titan Investments page on my laptop. Daniel's account showed a fake balance of $145,000. The bright green numbers were a cruel trick, a rich dream just out of reach. I rested my finger on the mouse, took a slow breath. Then, with one careful click, I hit the key that could not be undone. The offshore server deleted the site for good. The green numbers disappeared instantly. A sharp white error 404 site not found page took its place. My phone buzzed right away on the glass. It was Mike's line, safe and secure. "The mark's falling apart," Mike said, calm but sharp. "My burner phone is ringing nonstop. He's leaving voicemail after voicemail. He can't reach the portal." "Cut the connection," I ordered, staring at the 404 error on the screen. "Destroy the SIM card. Throw the pieces away." I ended the last link the parasite had. I switched on the live audio feed from the Trojan Bear and put on my big noise-canceling headphones. The sound of a mouse clicking fast and hard came through the mic. Daniel was breathing fast and shaky, hitting refresh on the dead web page over and over. Click, click, click. Suddenly, the sharp sound of the front doorbell rang out, breaking into his digital panic. "Are you waiting for someone?" Daniel snapped, his voice filled with fear and worry. The heavy front door creaked open. The quiet noise from the street came inside. "Sophie Gilbert? You've been served," said a serious, deep voice. "Served? For what?" Sophie said, confused and scared. The sound of thick paper being opened filled the silence. "Oh, no," she gasped, her voice dropping to a scared whisper. Chris filed an emergency order. He's taking full custody of Melody. He says this place isn't good for her." "The site is gone," Daniel yelled from the living room, not paying attention to Sophie's news. He was lost in his own disaster. "What do you mean it's gone?" she asked as the papers hit the floor. "The money's gone, Sophie. The broker won't answer. I'm done." Daniel's world came crashing down. The harsh truth hit him like a heavy truck. The deadline from the cartel was just a few hours away, and he had nothing. I put the audio on mute for a moment. I called a special secure number. "Dad, code red. Did you get her?" I asked, voice cold and focused. "I picked up Melody from preschool 2 hours ago, just like you said," my father answered. The sound of his truck made a low rumble, and some soft noise from the Bluetooth came through. "Are you out of the county?" "We just crossed the state line. We won't stop until we reach the cabin. Keep her safe inside. Turn off all phones and devices until I say otherwise." I hung up the phone. The most important piece, the only thing that really mattered, was gone for good. I turned the audio feed back on. The house had fallen into total chaos. "You set me up," Daniel hissed, his voice cold and full of fear. "What? No. I didn't do anything." Sophie stepped back, her bare feet scraping loudly on the wooden floor. "You told him about my debt. You told him about the safe." A glass vase fell and broke on the wall with a sharp crash. The loud noise made the microphone crackle painfully in my ears. "You both planned this. You took the money, he takes the child, and you leave me for those port boys." Daniel sounded clearly out of control. His fast movements, strange voice changes, and strong feelings showed he was very upset and confused. "Daniel, stop! You're scaring Jacob," Sophie shouted. The baby began to cry loudly from the kitchen playpen, his voice high and full of fear. Suddenly, a sharp sound came from the kitchen, the noise of a kitchen knife being taken from a block. That sound sent a chill down my spine. "I'm not going to lose to you," Daniel yelled. "Daniel!" Put it down! Sophie screamed, her voice full of fear. The room felt much colder. I stood slowly, holding tightly to my desk until my arms ached. I'm taking my son, and if you try to stop me, you'll regret it, Daniel said. The knife moved through the air, making a strange whistling sound. Give me the car keys, he ordered, walking hard across the kitchen tiles. No, you can't take Jacob. He's just a baby, Sophie cried, lowering herself over the playpen to block the child. Suddenly, there was a struggle. Sophie cried out in pain as Daniel grabbed her roughly. She broke free, tearing her clothes and running her hands over the counter to grab her phone. I heard her fingers trying to call for help. Daniel reached out and hit the phone from her hands. It broke on the floor and slid under the cabinets. You're not calling anyone, he growled, breathing fast and heavy. With all her strength, Sophie grabbed the crying baby and ran down the short hallway. Her breath came in quick gasps. The bathroom door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked just before Daniel hit the door hard. The whole house shook from the impact. Open the door, he shouted, hitting the door again and again. The wood creaked and cracked under his fists. I looked at my watch. 8:27 a.m. I didn't reach for my phone to call for help. I already had. 10 minutes before, knowing what was about to happen when the money disappeared, I called the emergency line. I told them there was a serious problem at home. I gave the dispatcher the exact layout of the house and updated them on Daniel's location, all from the live audio I was listening to until they arrived. The place was now a locked trap. No way out. I will break through this door. Open it, Daniel shouted, sounding more wild than human. The sound of a knife hitting the thick bathroom door kept going, breaking small pieces of wood with every hit. Under that noise, I heard the police sirens getting closer and louder. Cops! Daniel's voice trembled, stopping the knife hitting instantly. The silence felt thick and heavy. You called the cops? The sirens were right outside now, mixing with the loud screech of tires on pavement. Police! Drop the weapon and open the door! A strong voice shouted through a loudspeaker outside. Daniel stepped back, slipping on the smooth floor, breathing fast and shallow. Then the big front door smashed open and was pushed off its hinges by a team trained for moments like this. Drop the knife! Get down, now! 3 officers yelled at once, their voices strong and clear all around. Daniel froze for a second, confused and unable to think. Then there was a quick, sharp sound, and a burst of electricity made muscles lock up. He fell hard, face down on the floor, like a tree cut down. Heavy boots moved in fast. The sound of handcuffs closing tight made everything feel final. Clear the house! Check the bathroom! The leading officer ordered into his radio. We've got the suspect, another said while searching Daniel. Checking pockets. There was the sound of fabric moving. We found a big bag. Looks like meth and a lot of it, the officer said. I gave a small, bitter smile at the quiet screen of my laptop. About an hour ago, I sent an anonymous, very detailed tip to the police drug unit. It quickly led to results. The threat of serious drug charges for possession and selling was no longer just a worry. It was now real and unavoidable. I closed my laptop carefully, put it in my leather briefcase, and left my office. I did not even look at my assistant as I headed for the elevator. Half an hour later, I arrived at the busy scene near a house in the suburb. The red and blue police lights flashed quickly, casting long, sharp shadows over the neat lawns of nearby homes. A small group of neighbors stood around, watching what had broken the usual calm of the quiet street. I got out of my car and fixed my suit cuffs. I walked past the yellow police tape confidently, not bothered by the noisy commotion. A paramedic put a shiny warm blanket over Sophie's shaking shoulders. She sat on the metal bumper at the back of an ambulance, holding her crying baby close to her chest. Her face was wet with tears and dirt, with a dark bruise growing on her cheek. 2 large officers pulled Daniel roughly from the damaged front door. He looked hurt and was bleeding from his nose. His hands were tightly cuffed behind his back. He shouted strange words, clearly upset and affected by drugs, as the officers pushed him down and put him into the locked back of a police car. I walked straight to the ambulance, stopping just a few feet from Sophie. I stayed on my side of the line. She looked up, her wide, scared eyes meeting mine. She seemed to expect me to offer some comfort. Her body moved a little forward, as if hoping I would step closer, hold her, and act like the hero here to save her from this terrible situation. I looked at her. I saw the broken pieces of her life, that bruised face, the frightened baby, the ruined house, and the angry man locked in the police car. All of this had come from her own choices. My face stayed still and unreadable. The white tape on my knuckles was covered quietly beneath my jacket sleeve. I felt no anger, no hatred, and no sympathy. I only showed a cold, clear look of a stranger, sizing up a stranger. Without saying a word, I turned away and walked toward the detective waiting by the crime scene tape. It was time to give my official statement about the emergency custody order. Like the person who had planned everything, I watched quietly as the result of my actions took shape around me. The damage to the building was just the first part of what needed to be done. There was another step that needed more care and focus. It had to end all legal and personal ties for good. It was Friday, 11:30 p.m. The cold white lights of the interrogation room deep inside the 4th precinct made dark shadows on the plain block walls. The air smelled like strong cleaning chemicals, old coffee, and sweat. Through the glass, I watched Sophie. She sat all alone at a scratched metal table, her shoulders slumped. She wore a simple, too-big gray police sweatshirt, probably given to her by a kind nurse. Her home was now closed off, filled with officers collecting evidence. Her partner was locked up inside a holding cell down the hall, facing serious time in prison. Sophie looked at the wall without focus. Broken. The crash of her adrenaline left her shaking and her knees moving under the table without control. I looked at my handcuffs and fixed my tie. The heavy metal door made a loud click as I opened it. I walked inside. My suit was clean and neat, standing out against the harshness of the place. I kept my face calm and unreadable. Valerie came in right after me. She gave off a strong force of power, strict and cold. Her back was straight and her face was hard as stone. We pulled chairs out and sat in front of Sophie. The mood in the small room changed fast. Valerie had all the power. She did not say hello. She put her leather case on her lap, took out a thick folder full of papers, and dropped it hard on the table. The sound echoed through the empty room, firm and final. "What is this?" Sophie whispered. Her voice was weak and worn from crying and gasping for air for hours. Valerie spoke coldly with a serious tone. "This is the final giving up of your rights as a parent to Melody." Valerie reached into her jacket, took out a heavy gold pen and slid it over the signature line at the bottom of the paper. Sophie looked at the black ink, her eyes wide with new fear. She looked up at me, her hands clutching her chest. "You can't do this to me, Chris," she begged, tears running down her tired face. "I was forced into this too," Valerie quickly replied, not letting Sophie catch her breath. "You took part in making a dangerous situation that could have harmed a child. I didn't know he had drugs. I didn't know he could be dangerous," Sophie cried, her voice shaking as she tried to explain. "Not knowing isn't an excuse for serious mistakes," Valerie said firmly. She didn't show any pity. "You hid someone wanted by the law. You let a small child be around dangerous things." I stayed quiet. My hands rested on the cold metal table as Valerie kept up the pressure. "You have a choice, Miss Gilbert," Valerie said. She leaned close, taking up Sophie's space at the table. "Sign the papers to give up your rights to your daughter now." Sophie shook her head and crossed her arms tightly. "I won't do that. I'll fight you. Or," Valerie said calmly, ignoring Sophie's words, "we take this to court." She tapped a thick folder on the table. "I will call the officers to talk. I will show proof you let someone who is not safe be around the toddler." "I'll fight you," Sophie said again, crying softly. But she seemed smaller now, hiding inside her big sweatshirt. "You will lose," I said for the first time. My voice was cold, final. It didn't sound angry, just true. Valerie took over smoothly. "And when you lose, I will ask the district attorney to charge you for putting the child in danger." She sat back, fixing her jacket carefully. "You'll be in jail right next to Daniel." Sophie's strength left her all at once. She collapsed in her chair, her shoulders dropped, and her head went down. The full weight of what was happening hit her hard. With shaky, pale fingers, she picked up a heavy gold pen. She pressed it down on thick paper and signed her name. The sound of the pen on the paper was loud in the quiet room. "That's a good choice," Valerie said. She took the papers back, put them in her leather folder, and closed it tight. She stood up and straightened her skirt with care. She looked at me. "I'll send these to the judge tonight. I'll wait outside." Valerie turned and left. The heavy metal door slammed shut behind her, locking with a loud click. At last, I was alone with my ex-wife, the woman who once built a life with me, now sitting broken across from me. Sophie covered her face with her hands, crying softly, making a wet, quiet sound. "Are you happy now, Chris? You took everything from me." "Everything." "I took nothing," I said, my voice calm, matching the slow tick of the clock above the door. "I only took what was mine." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a small silver USB drive and 3 shiny photos. I dropped the photos onto the scratched metal table. They spread out right in front of her crossed arms. "Did you really think he cared about you, Sophie?" I asked, leaning back in the hard chair. She looked up, wiping her face with a shaky hand. Confusion mixed with deep sadness showed in her eyes. He said we had a special bond. He said I made him feel alive," she whispered. "Did you think that Thursday night was just a careless mistake?" I took my phone from my pocket. I plugged in a small black adapter, then put in the silver USB drive. I opened the video player on the screen. "Mike got this from Daniel's extra phone before the police took it," I said, setting the phone on the table between us. I pressed play. A woman's voice came through the quiet room. The sound was a bit muffled, but still clear. She was laughing. "Chris goes to Europe Thursday," the voice said happily through the tiny speaker. Sophie froze. Her breath caught. Her shaking stopped right away. She knew the voice. It was Chantal, her closest co-worker, her supposed best friend, the woman she ate lunch with every day at school. "I'll make sure she drinks without eating first," Chantal's voice said, calm and casual, as if talking about simple tasks. "I'll get her drunk by 10. You just wait there." Daniel's voice came next. It was low, serious, without any friendliness. "Are you sure she'll go along with it?" Chantal laughed. It was a mean, bitter laugh that echoed off the cold walls. "Make sure you shave to look just like Chris. The lighting in there is awful." A brief pause. "When she's drunk enough, she'll trust anyone she knows." Sophie covered her mouth. She was breathing fast and shallow. Her chest rose and fell with panic as the audio played on, showing her pain in a new way. "Just do your part, Daniel." Chantal's tone changed from friendly to businesslike. "Don't forget my share of the money once you use up her savings. I want 10%. The recording stopped. Silence filled the room. It was heavy and hard to breathe in. I reached out and tapped the photos on the table. They showed Daniel standing behind the school parking lot, taken from far away. He was handing Chantal a thick, plain envelope filled with money. Suddenly, Sophie realized the truth, and it hit her like a hard blow to the head. She hadn't been caught up in a sweet, unexpected love. Instead, she had been tricked in a cruel plan. The plan was made by her own best friend because of jealousy and carried out by someone desperate for money. Everything Sophie believed was broken at once. The idea of a loving story, the reasons she told herself to handle the pain, all of it was gone like dust on the cold metal table. She saw herself for what she was, a pawn, a fool, a target. The shock was so strong her body couldn't handle it. She gasped, her eyes wide and glassy. Then she suddenly reached for a small metal trash can and was sick. Her body shook as she got rid of the upset feeling inside. Trying to sit down, she missed the chair and fell hard onto the cold floor. She cried uncontrollably, making sounds that were not words, just the pure pain of someone broken. Slowly, she crawled forward across the dirty floor. Her hands, trembling and wet with sweat, reached out and grabbed the leg of my suit pants. "Chris! Chris! I'm so sorry! I didn't know!" she cried, looking up at me with pain all over her face. "They tricked me! They used me!" She was full of regret. "I lost everything for nothing. Please, please forgive me." Her face showed clear horror. She knew she had given up someone valuable for a worthless mistake. I looked down at her, crying and holding on to me. Seeing her like that brought me no happiness, no feeling of being right, just a cold, empty end. I did not go down to comfort her or touch her head like before. I carefully took her shaky fingers off my suit leg, one by one. You were easy to fool, Sophie, because your pride made you weak, I said, my voice cold over her sobs. You let trouble into our home because you wanted to feel important. I stepped back, out of her reach. I fixed my jacket where she had grabbed it. You made your choice, I said, looking at the broken woman on the floor. Now live with what you have done. Then I turned and walked toward the heavy metal door. Chris, don't leave me here, please. Don't leave me, she called after me. Her voice broke, filled with deep, frightening sadness. I opened the heavy door and stepped out into the bright, buzzing hallway of the police station. The steel door closed firmly behind me. The lock clicked shut, keeping her inside with the full weight of what she had done. I didn't look back. Monday morning, 7 a.m. I sat at the large glass desk in my quiet office. The early light made long, sharp shadows on the floor. I sipped hot black coffee from a ceramic mug. The strong, bitter taste helped me focus. I opened my laptop and bypassed the usual network. I started a secure, protected email system, sending my connection through hidden servers far away. I began a new message. I attached an audio file where Chantal clearly explained her plan to trick Sophie, use a lookalike, and get money unfairly. I also added clear photos showing Daniel giving Chantal an envelope of cash in the high school parking lot. I typed 3 carefully chosen email addresses: Chantal's husband, the principal of the school where she worked, and the district's top official. In the subject line, I wrote, "Serious misconduct and illegal plan." I left the message empty. The evidence spoke for itself. I moved the mouse to send the email. I clicked. The message disappeared into the internet, carried away by invisible wires. The results came quickly, clearly, and without violence. By Wednesday, 2 security officers walked Chantal out of her third-period math class. She was placed on unpaid leave while the school looked into the matter. By Friday, the situation was settled. The school board fired her and took away her teaching license. 2 hours later, her angry husband gave her divorce papers and changed the locks on their house. I took another sip of coffee and watched the city wake up through the big windows. It was a clean end to a difficult problem. The board was safe. The risks were gone. The hard part of my life was over. 2 months later, Monday, 10 a.m. The morning sun shone through the spotless glass of Valerie's office, casting a bright light across her clean desk. I sat across from her, relaxed but careful. Valerie pushed a thick stack of papers across the shiny desk. The top sheet had the official seal of the city court. The bank completed the foreclosure on Tuesday at 9 a.m., Valerie said clearly, her voice calm but full of quiet confidence. Did she try to stop it? I asked, looking closely at the red court stamps on the front page. She had no money left to fight it, Valerie answered, folding her hands neatly. She missed 3 payments in a row after Daniel emptied her safe. The bank acted very fast. What about the purchase through the proxy? I tapped the heavy paper of the property deed. I used my offshore company to bid at the closed auction this morning. We kept all other buyers out within 10 minutes. Valerie leaned back in her big leather chair, a small, sharp smile on her lips. You just bought your own house back for much less than it's worth. And her share? Completely wiped out, Valerie said. Removed from the public records, the foreclosure erased her rights. She walks away with nothing. I picked up the heavy silver pen in the holder on Valerie's desk. I signed the final transfer line on the deed with quick, firm strokes. The dark ink soaked into the paper deeply. Big properties need a lot of care, Valerie said, watching me sign. I'm not living there, I replied, putting the pen down. I'm going to fix it inside and turn it into a rental property to earn steady income. I slid the signed deed back across the cool desk. All the money will go into Melody's college fund. A perfect business deal, Valerie smiled, closing the folder and putting it into her outbox. The field is yours. Tuesday afternoon. I stood behind the large glass desk in my office, sleeves rolled up, looking over a detailed blueprint for a new data center in Europe. The heavy glass door opened. Mike came in, his coat smelling like cold city air. He skipped the chairs and dropped a thick, worn envelope right onto the center of the desk, on top of the blueprints. Surveillance update on the ex-wife. As you asked, Mike said gruffly. Tell me the quick version. I don't want to look at her, I told him without looking away from the plans. She's really hit bottom, Mike said quietly. She worked 40 hours a week scanning barcodes at a discount store on the Far East Side. Where does she live? I asked, tracing a column on the blueprint with my pen. A small, cramped studio apartment right above a laundromat that's open 24 hours. The heat is on and off, Mike said, folding his arms and shaking his head slowly. She takes the bus. The baby cries all night through the thin walls. The women nearby avoid her. She's completely alone. Mike reached into his heavy coat and took out a thick folded letter. He dropped it on the glass desk. She asked me to give this to you at the store's parking lot. 15 pages, front and back. I looked down. The familiar handwriting stood out on the front of the envelope, shaky and hurried. She told me everything, Chris, Mike said quietly. She took full blame, said she ruined the best man she ever knew for a cheap lie. I put my pen down and picked up the heavy envelope. It felt full of her pain and regret. A long letter won't fix what happened. It won't bring back what was lost, I said, staring at the writing. I didn't break the seal. I didn't open it to read one single sorry word. I turned and walked to the paper shredder near my filing cabinet. I fed the thick envelope into the blades. The machine struggled, then tore through the paper, turning her apology into tiny, unreadable strips. She's gone from my world, I said, brushing a tiny piece of paper off my sleeve. It was Saturday evening. My large, open living room in the sleek penthouse looked out at the sparkling city lights. The soft, warm lights inside made the room feel calm. Melody sat cross-legged on the soft white rug in the middle of the room. She was carefully snapping together parts of a gray model airplane. She smiled brightly as a piece clicked perfectly into place. She felt safe, happy, and far from any trouble. It had been weeks since she had said her mother's name. The private elevator at the end of the hall made a soft ding. The steel doors slid open smoothly. Valerie stepped into the penthouse. She wore a beautiful, tight black evening dress that filled the room with her presence. In her left hand, she carried a heavy bottle of vintage Macallan single malt without its box. "Valerie!" Melody called out happily. She left the plastic airplane behind and quickly got up from the carpet to run over and hug Valerie's legs. Valerie smiled, a warm, real smile that she rarely showed at work. She bent down and gently moved a stray lock of Melody's hair behind her ear. "Look at you, chief engineer," Valerie said softly. "That plane is almost ready to fly." I walked over from the kitchen island and took the heavy bottle from Valerie's hand. "You're late, counselor," I said. "I had to file papers to block arrival," she replied with a small, knowing smile. Her eyes showed sharp energy as she stepped closer to me. I went to the bar cart and poured 2 exact drinks of the amber liquid into heavy crystal glasses. Turning back, I gave her a glass. Our fingers touched briefly on the crystal. The quiet connection between us was strong, made of mutual respect and silent power. There were no misunderstandings here. We raised our glasses and clinked them. This was not a romantic toast. It was a serious pact, a bond built only on fierce loyalty, top performance, and steady respect. "To the new order," Valerie whispered, looking at me over the glass rim. "To strong boundaries," I answered, taking a slow sip of the scotch. It was a sharp upgrade for a man who had stood firm against tough times. Monday morning. The secure, unlisted phone on my desk blinked fast in a red light. I pressed the speaker button while still reading an email from a European supplier. "Mike, report. Just got a solid tip from a guard who works at the maximum security federal block." Mike's voice came through the speaker, rough but clear. "Is it about the problem?" I asked calmly, keeping my voice even. "Daniel was attacked in the shower area this morning. 3 tough guys with sharp blades. They aimed right for his back." I stopped reading and turned my leather chair to look out the tall window. Below, the heavy traffic moved slowly on the gray street. "Did he live?" "Just barely," Mike said. "Doctors say his lower spine is badly damaged. He will be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life." I thought carefully about what this meant. Who ordered this? The port group trying to settle a score? No. Here's the real shock, Mike said with a dark laugh, dry and bitter over the static. His own brother, Mark, paid for it. I raised one eyebrow. Explain. Mark blamed Daniel for getting arrested. He said Daniel had ruined the family's good name and spoiled his own chance to come back in the business. So Mark ended the problem. Predators start to fight each other when there's no more food, I said calmly, thinking over their fall. Daniel is trapped forever, stuck in his broken body. The score is settled, Chris. Close the file, Mike. Good job. I reached out and ended the call. The line went quiet. Wednesday evening. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the firm's lobby and stepped outside into the cool, clear evening air. Near the curb, a familiar large man stood in the soft light of a street lamp. He held an old tweed cap tightly in his hands. It was Norm. I stopped right away, keeping a clear distance on the sidewalk. I did not move closer or say hello. Norm moved forward slowly. His eyes were wet and red. His face was deeply lined, marked by shame and deep tiredness. He looked 10 years older than when I last saw him. Chris, I know I have no right to come to you, he said, voice shaky and full of feeling. Keep it short, Norm. I have a meeting, I replied, looking at my watch. I just wanted to look you in the eye and say sorry. As a father. As a man. A single tear slipped down his worn, gray cheek. My daughter's terrible failure. The shame she brought on you. I failed her. I failed to raise a woman with honor. I stayed calm and steady. The sidewalk felt solid under my feet. I didn't give empty words or false comfort. You didn't cause her choices, Norm, I said, voice cold and steady. She's an adult who let a bad person into her life. Norm wiped his face with his hand, nodding slowly. You handled this like a real man, Chris. You kept your daughter safe, and you stood your ground. I respect you more than anyone I know. Norm stretched out a shaky, rough hand across the space between us. I looked at his hand for a moment, letting silence fill the air. Then I stepped forward. I shook his hand firmly, showing respect for his honesty. Take care of yourself, Norm. I let go and turned away, walking toward my car. Friday, 11 a.m. The big wood-paneled boardroom sat at the top floor of our firm. The air was thick with quiet energy. Mr. Roy stood at the head of the large polished table, surrounded by the 12 senior board members. I stood across the room from him, my body stiff and strong, showing clear confidence. The European launch is not just good, Chris. It has changed how we do business all over the world, Mr. Roy said loudly, full of pride. Apex Corp is losing customers, and we are taking over their whole business. Mr. Roy walked along the long table and stopped right in front of me. He held out his right hand. Starting now, the board has all agreed to make you Vice President of Global Operations. I shook his hand firmly with one strong move that showed control. I take the job seriously. We will double our profits by December. The board members clapped, standing up and moving their fancy shoes on the carpet as they came forward to shake my hand. You didn't just get through a hard time, Chris, Mr. Roy said quietly while patting my shoulder and pulling me close. You turned it into your strength. I just removed the problems, I answered calmly, fixing my silk tie. I had reached the next level. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal a man can have and came out better, much stronger and fully in control. Sunday morning, 8 a.m. I unlocked the heavy oak door of the old house in the quiet neighborhood. The door's hinges, recently fixed by the police, made a soft creak. Inside, the house was totally empty. My heavy boots made loud sounds on the bare wood floors. The furniture was gone. The rugs were gone. The silence in the empty house felt thick, cleared of all old memories and bad feelings. I walked past the kitchen, ignoring the place where the bad news was told and the place where Daniel had kept her for a time, heading straight to the basement door. I went down the wooden stairs into the cool, still air below. The far corner of the basement still smelled slightly of damp and mildew where a pipe had burst months before, causing everything to fall apart. The walls were sagging, stained with brown marks from the water, and falling apart. I took off my suit jacket carefully and hung it over the stair railing. I rolled up the sleeves of my white dress shirt past my elbows. I put on a pair of thick, strong leather gloves and tightened the straps around my wrists firmly. I reached into my heavy canvas bag on the concrete floor. I pulled out a large, heavy steel sledgehammer. I held the hammer in my hands, feeling its hard, heavy weight. The past was gone. The future needed a fresh, clear start. I stood steady. My boots pressed firmly against the cold concrete floor. I lifted the heavy hammer high over my right shoulder. Then I swung it hard forward. The iron hit the old drywall, breaking through it in a cloud of white dust and broken pieces. I hit the water-damaged wall 2 more times. The hammer's force went through the wooden handle and into my arms. A big part of the wall caved in with a quiet thud. Dust floated in the still air of the basement. I stepped back and lowered the hammer to the floor. The air felt sharp and dusty. I wiped sweat and dust from my forehead with my glove. I set the hammer down on a wooden stand and reached into my tool bag. I pulled out a strong, military-style flashlight. I clicked the switch. A bright beam cut through the dust, lighting up the dark hole I had just made. I thought I would see old pink insulation or rotting wood, but what I found was different. The space wasn't empty. It was a small, closed-off area made of bricks and old gray mortar. The brickwork was carefully done and did not belong in a regular basement wall. This hidden spot was clearly older than my time in the house and the work I had done before. I stepped closer. The broken drywall cracked under my boots. I aimed the light inside the brick space. In the center, there was a heavy rusted metal box. Dust and spiderwebs covered it, left untouched for years. The box had a faded brass padlock that looked very old. The truth hit me right away. This house was not just another random property. It had once belonged to my father. 35 years ago, this was where he lived before he became a big boss at his company. That was before he gave the house to Sophie and me as a special wedding gift. Whatever was inside this box had been hidden away carefully by my own father. It was covered with bricks and closed off for good. I looked back at my tool bag. I skipped the screwdrivers and hammers and grabbed a heavy steel bar with my gloved hand. I stepped toward the open space in the wall. With my left hand, I reached in and pulled the metal box out. It was cold and rusty against my gloves. I placed it on an old wooden table nearby, making dust rise in the beam of my flashlight. I put the flat end of the pry bar under the old brass padlock. I held it tightly, stood firmly, and pushed hard. The lock fought for a moment, then snapped loudly, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls. I dropped the broken lock and used the bar to lift the heavy lid. The hinges made a loud noise as they opened. A dusty, musty smell floated out from inside. It was the smell of very old paper and dried glue. Inside, neatly stacked, were old work reports and handwritten money records from 30 years ago. The paper was fragile, and the ink had turned brown with age. Under the papers lay a thick diary bound in black leather. The cover was cracked and smooth from being used many times. I pulled it out carefully, feeling the worn leather through my gloves. Opening the diary near the middle, I shined my flashlight on the pages. The handwriting was clear and familiar. It was my father's neat, careful writing. I quickly looked through the pages filled with short notes. They were about his work far north on a huge hydroelectric project. The notes showed locations, materials used, and ground conditions. As I turned to the end of the diary, a small, worn photo slipped out. It fell to the dusty floor and landed face up on the thin layer of white dust. I picked up the photo slowly, holding it by the edges, and shone my flashlight on its shiny surface. It was an old Polaroid picture. The colors were a bit faded, and the edges looked blurry from age and bad storage. In the middle of the photo stood my father. He looked about 30 years old, with no signs of stress on his face and thick, dark hair. He wore a heavy winter coat made for very cold places. Behind him was a wide, bright field of snow. His right arm was wrapped closely around the waist of an indigenous woman who wore a similar fur-lined coat. Standing in front of them, staring right at the camera with a hard and sad look, was a mixed-race teenage boy. I looked closely at his face. The shape of his jaw, the dark eyes, the sharp cheekbones, they all seemed very familiar. It was the young face of Mark Levesque, without any doubt. I turned the Polaroid over. On the back, in faded blue ink, my father's neat handwriting read, Kuujjuaq, 1991. The boys. Suddenly, I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. The basement seemed to get much colder, a chill spreading from the photo through my arm and tightening my chest. My mind raced as pieces of old memories fit together in a new way. I saw the truth clearly. Mark and Daniel Levesque weren't just strangers or bad men. They were my father's children, sons he had left behind. They were my half-brothers. I leaned hard on the wooden workbench. My arms, locked in place, held all my weight. The old Polaroid felt like it was burning through my thick leather glove. Then, one strong memory flashed to the front of my mind, playing loudly in the quiet, dusty basement. It was Christmas Day, exactly 1 year ago. I remembered the quiet talk with my father in his study right after Daniel had shown up at my ex-wife's home and given my daughter a new doll. "You took nothing from that man, Chris," my father had said, his hand heavy on my shoulder. His voice sounded like he was trying to teach me something important, but it wasn't true wisdom. "You didn't start this. You don't owe him a thing. He owes you." But it was not good advice. It wasn't the careful advice of a retired manager studying human behavior. It was pure cowardly guilt. My father knew exactly who Daniel Levesque was the moment he saw him in my living room. He didn't just see a stranger who looked a little like his son. He saw a clear, undeniable copy of his own secret mistakes staring back at him over the Christmas tree. He watched his real son's life fall apart because of his other son, and he chose to say nothing. He chose to protect his perfect upper-class reputation. He protected the false story of the Harvey family instead of caring about what was really happening to me. He let me suffer for his past mistakes, offering only empty words while quietly watching my life fall apart from his leather chair. The truth hit me hard. It changed everything I thought I knew. Mark's deep, angry hatred wasn't just about losing a work contract in Europe. That loss was only the start. The real reason was the deep, long-lasting revenge of the son someone had left behind. He wanted to destroy the legitimate son who had the perfect life, house, and father. They used my face. They made the connection to my family to break my wife's trust and tear apart the family they never had. Then I realized something even worse, and it hit me like a wave of sickness. Baby Jacob, the crying baby living in a small, cold apartment with Sophie. He wasn't just the result of my ex-wife's mistake with a stranger that night. Jacob was my real half-nephew. Sophie was raising a child who carried the same blood as the man she had hurt. The cruel irony of all this was complete. She destroyed our family and her own life and gave up her daughter just to bring another Levesque into the world. The anger I felt toward Sophie last year, the fiery rage that led to our divorce and her losing everything, suddenly felt small. Not important at all. She was just a weak, vain person, easily used and moved by people who knew exactly how to control her mind. But this was a whole different kind of fight. This was a betrayal by my own family. I had been tricked, used to protect someone else, and let down by the head of my family. A new, very cold feeling grew deep inside me. It was not the hot kind of anger that burns quickly. It was a cold, quiet anger that did not change or move. I did not yell. I did not throw the heavy hammer against the wall. I did not break anything in the basement. I carefully put the old photo back into the rusty metal box. I placed it on top of the old leather diary with slow, careful movements that felt like a routine. I closed the heavy steel lid, hearing the rusty hinges make a soft sound in the dark room. I took off my thick leather gloves and dropped them on the workbench. I reached into my suit jacket hanging over the banister and pulled out a shiny silver cigar case. I opened it, took out the tobacco, and clipped the end with a small cutter on my keychain. I lit a wooden match and set the cigar on fire in the dark basement. The red tip glowed brightly through the dust. I blew out a slow cloud of blue smoke and watched it rise, curling around the wooden beams and the broken drywall above. Plans for a new fight began to fill my mind. The business fight with Apex was finished. The personal fight with my ex-wife was over. Now, the battle for family, legacy, and inheritance had begun. Sunday evening, 7 p.m. I drove my luxury car smoothly through the tall, wrought-iron gates of my parents' large estate. The tires made a soft, crunching sound on the white gravel driveway. Ahead, the big stone house stood tall, glowing warmly from the garden lights. Valerie sat in the passenger seat, wearing a simple, dark gray evening dress that made her look serious and calm. She looked straight ahead, showing no sign of weakness. She was not just a guest. She was here to support me with strong legal help. I parked beneath the grand entrance. I opened the back door and helped Melody unbuckle her seatbelt. She stepped onto the cobblestone, wearing a clean white dress. Her dark hair was braided neatly. "Is it time for Grandpa's birthday?" Melody asked, holding up a small, brightly wrapped gift she had chosen by herself. "Yes, sweetie," I said. My voice was calm and steady with no hint of anger or excitement. "It's time to give Grandpa exactly what he deserves." I walked to the back of the car and opened the large trunk. I took out a big, dark green canvas bag. The thick cloth hid a rusted, dirty metal box I had taken from the basement wall 2 days before. We climbed the wide stone steps and pushed open the large double front doors. Inside, the grand entry hall was filled with soft talking from wealthy family members and important guests. Gentle music from a string quartet played quietly from hidden speakers. The air smelled of fancy food and old perfumes. My mother, wearing a smooth silk dress, rushed forward. She smiled brightly and knelt down to hug Melody, not noticing the tense feeling in the room. Everything looked perfect, like a picture of a rich family. The lights were just right. The snacks looked too good to eat. The guests were carefully chosen. We moved to the formal dining room and sat at a huge mahogany table set with clear crystal glasses and old, shiny silverware. I ate the many courses without saying a word. I watched my father, the head of the family, sitting at the top of the table. He laughed kindly, poured fine wine, and shared his usual advice while the guests nodded eagerly. I looked at his sharp tuxedo and his smiling face. I noticed his strong jawline and, with a cold feeling, realized everything. The big house, the family, the proud story, was a carefully made-up lie. At 8:30 p.m., the fancy dinner ended. The catering team quickly cleared the white plates. The guests moved to the far side of the big room and gathered around my father's tall leather chair for the usual gift-giving. He relaxed, holding a glass of whiskey with a round ice cube, laughing at a golf joke from my uncle. I stood up. I didn't look at the neat pile of bright-wrapped gifts on the side. I took the heavy canvas bag straight to the front of the room. The people moved aside a bit, expecting me to do something important and warm. The quiet talking stopped as they waited. I reached into the bag and pulled out the heavy rusted metal box. I placed the old, dirty box on the shiny wooden side table, right in front of my father. The metal scraped loudly on the wood, leaving a faint white mark from the dust on the polished surface. "Happy 70th, Dad," I said loudly so everyone in the room could hear. "I found a piece of family history hidden behind the wall in your old basement." My father's warm, practiced smile disappeared in an instant. His eyes focused on the box I held. His face lost all color fast, going pale like someone who had seen something very bad. He knew the old brass right away. He saw the bent metal. He reached out, but his hand was shaking so hard that his cufflink made a loud noise when it hit the wood. He pushed open the broken lid. He looked inside. There was a cracked old diary wrapped in black leather. On top of some yellowed papers lay an old Polaroid photo, showing a woman he had left behind and a young boy. His skin turned a sick, grayish color. He looked like a man who had just been scared badly. His right hand shook so much that he dropped his glass of whiskey. It fell, broke on the heavy table edge, and spilled amber liquid and sharp glass everywhere. The white tablecloth soaked up the drink as glass bits scattered over the fine carpet. Everyone around gasped softly. The music from the string quartet filled the room, sounding too loud and strange. "Norman? What's wrong?" my mother asked, stepping forward with a worried voice. Her dress made a soft, rustling sound in the sudden quiet. I ignored her question and didn't look at the shocked guests. I placed my hands on the edge of the table and leaned in close to my father. We were just inches apart. I smelled the spilled whiskey and his strong fear. My voice dropped to a quiet, sharp tone meant only for him. "Your mistakes made 2 problems, and they just destroyed my marriage." He looked at me, his mouth moving, but no words came out. His breathing was fast and shallow. He sat frozen in his chair, caught by how much his past had been shown. I stepped back and stood tall, looking down at him, the man who caused this family's pain. "The party is over," I said coldly. I turned away without a word. I gave my very confused mother a small, polite nod. I bent down and took Melody's small hand gently in mine. Valerie moved smoothly to stand beside me. She stood tall and strong, like a solid wall of authority. She didn't seem bothered by the broken glass, spilled drink, or the tense silence in the room. We left the large dining room without saying a word. Our steps sounded loud on the shiny marble floor of the hall. I pushed open the heavy front doors and stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the big house behind. Inside, my father sat at the head of the table, stunned, surrounded by the mess that showed the end of his lifelong lies. It was Monday morning, 9 a.m. I sat at the big, neat desk in my new office as vice president at Apex Corp. The morning sun shone through the window, lighting up the dark leather chair. The secure phone on my desk suddenly rang. The sound was sharp and cold. I looked at the screen. It was blank. The call couldn't be traced. I pressed the silver speaker button. Speak! A heavy, rough coughing came through the phone, followed by a wheezing sound. A man was struggling to breathe. It was Daniel. His voice was weak, slurred, and broken, but still full of bitter anger. He was calling from a secret phone that was smuggled into the prison hospital where he was held. I did not show any sign of surprise. My face stayed calm as I looked out the window at the city far away. Daniel coughed again, a wet, rattling noise that told of his bad lungs trying to clear. "Did you find the gift in the wall, brother?" he asked, his voice low and rough. "You think you won," Daniel said with a cruel laugh that quickly turned into a sound of pain. "You took my freedom. You hurt me badly. I can't feel my legs." He paused, breathing hard, his voice shaking but full of anger as he pushed for one last insult. "But I left a part of me inside your wife." This was all he had left. Their family secret. "Jacob is the shadow that will follow you forever," Daniel whispered bitterly. "He's a Levesque. You will see my son for the rest of your life." I leaned back in my heavy leather chair, calm and still. I stayed calm and showed no reaction to the desperate, weak words. I looked at the red light blinking on the speakerphone. "You're stuck in a permanent trap," I said. My voice was cold and flat. There was no anger, no hate, just plain truth. "Mark is on the run, hiding from the very group you owe money to." I slowly fixed the gold buttons on my sharp suit. "And I'm sitting in the vice president's chair at Apex Corp." On the other end, all was silent except for Daniel's heavy, weak breathing. "Jacob isn't a ghost," I said, my voice cutting through his sad, broken hope like a sharp knife. "He's a struggling, lost man living in a small, cold apartment over a laundromat with a cashier no one trusts." I leaned closer to the microphone to make sure he heard every word. "He's not a success. He's a living sign of your total failure." Daniel tried to speak, but only made a strange, angry noise, choking on his breath. "Goodbye, little brother." I pressed the flashing red button and ended the call for good, cutting off the connection without hesitation. I then reached for the silver intercom on my desk. "Yes, Chris," came Valerie's clear, sharp voice from the office next door. "Val, get the legal team ready for a big, coordinated attack. Cancel all my meetings this afternoon." "What's the target?" she asked, quickly changing to a serious and focused tone. "My father," I said, staring out the window toward the city. "We'll use the fraud, the hidden money, and the public scandal to make him sign over all the family's property and cash to Melody's trust." "A full takeover of the family wealth," Valerie said with strong approval, her voice sharp and eager. "Exactly. We'll make sure no one with the last name Levesque gets a single cent. I'll have the orders, the legal papers, and the first freezes on assets ready within an hour." The intercom clicked off sharply. I stood up and walked slowly to the huge glass window of my penthouse office. I slipped my hands into my pockets and looked out at the wide city stretching for miles. Far away, a large, dark storm was moving in quickly from the east. Heavy, dark clouds were covering the morning sun, casting long shadows over the tall glass buildings. Sophie was part of the past, a forgotten victim of a smaller fight. The real battle, the harsh, total fight over family, history, and what is passed down, had only just started. What a chilling end to a story full of deep betrayal and careful revenge. We want to know what you think. Was Chris right to take such a harsh approach to his family's hidden secrets? Or did he go too far in his search for justice? Share your thoughts about these complicated people in the comments below. And if you want more exciting stories full of trickery and payback, Be sure to subscribe to Cheating Heart Stories. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey. Sometimes the end of a broken life is the best place to plant the seeds for a strong new beginning. When you face deep betrayal, it's easy to let the pain take over. But real power comes from taking control again and setting strong boundaries. You are not shaped by the lies or betrayal of those who hurt you. Instead, you show strength by walking away and building your life back up. Keep your standards high, protect your calm, and remember that sometimes losing the wrong people opens the way for your biggest wins.